Welcome back to another episode of Pulling the Trigger, our precious little podcast where me, Stefan, and Mexi go through each of Studio Trigger's projects, both for the first time and sometimes for a repeat viewing, and go through our usual long-winded, several-hour analyses on what we liked, what we didn't like, what we would have changed, what does it mean, what is everything, and it's just we have a fun time over here, just going along talking about anime, and hope you enjoy it too. After 7-ish episodes, I can't even remember. I think this is episode 8. I'm pretty sure it's episode 8. It's even funnier if I don't know and I'm wrong, so I don't even want to double check.
Who even knows? Honestly, let's just all be grateful that since we are talking about anime, our discussions don't last nearly as long as watching the series themselves. Like, we got a little touch and dice there when it was a movie. It was like, yee, we had our usual FTCR shenanigans, but, like you said, we hope you enjoy it.
And now we've gotten to the point where we are basically at the end. We're at the end. We are at Trigger's most recent finished project, which when we started this last year, we were in a pre of this series world. Like, this was before this series came out, and now we're approaching the 1-year anniversary of this series release. So that does show again how long we've been doing this.
Damn, we've made it to the Emerald City and it's full of giant robots. I love it.
We are here to discuss Trigger's technically kind of first real sequel, SSSS Dynazenon.
Cue in the operatic Dynazenon.
Dynazenon!
So good. Hold it. Yep, there you go. Beautiful.
Yeah, and this one, which of course is the follow up, kind of, sort of, in a lot of ways, to SSSS Gridman, which, just for, again, like in that previous one, for consistency's sake, I'll just be referring to that as Gridman, and then if we're referring to Gridman as, like, the whole series, we'll say that. It's just, at least this one, we don't have to, like, confuse, like, with the two Gridmans, we just have Dynazenon, and it's, like, connected to everything else, and it's like,
it's surprisingly confusing, my dude, because we had Gridman the guy, Gridman the fragment, Gridman the show, Gridman the project, Gridman the franchise, versus Dynazenon here. Not nearly as bad, but we're gonna get to a point where is it Dynazenon the robot, Dynazenon the character, Dynazenon the series? It's a little funky and fuzzy there, but at least luckily we're not in a situation with some of the other Trigger properties where there was a lot of development shenanigans from certain streaming platforms that begin with the letter N. But really, I feel a lot of the pre-release of Dynazenon was more surrounded with how in the hell is it related to Gridman, given they both carry the SSSS title, which is now sort of become synonymous with like what this little universe that Trigger's created has so far, which, given Trigger's reputation and Trigger's history, who knows? It literally could just all still be in the Lulico universe. We might all still just be in it and we don't know. It's just that big. But like, I do remember that there was a lot of like, given the spoilery end of Gridman being that it was fully introspective into a single person's mind. How does one make a sequel from it? And I know there was a lot of stuff on that. And I think what with this show, what it ends up becoming, I think it succeeds in like being a good follow-up / sequel / equal tie-in to the original Hyper Agent Gridman, because it's all related. This Dynazenon is probably more, it's just as related as Gridman to the original Hyper Agent show. So I think it checks all the boxes there in terms of like Trigger putting its own spin on like an industry standard when it comes to like an anime sequel.
I do think as a series itself, Dynazenon of all Trigger projects, maybe it's because it is the most recent one, so it's like it hasn't like gone into the zeitgeist, so I hadn't been like taking it in through osmosis in any way like as much, but it's like or maybe this is just how the project is, but it's definitely the one that I'm most, I guess you could say, I'm trying to neutral, most conflict. I wouldn't say conflict. Conflict is not the right word. It's the most. It's hard to fully describe like the feelings. It's not like, say, in like the one, like something like your Kill la Kills or your Promare or like where you're like, oh, you really really like this and you have like really positive like emotion like right off the bat. It's not like Kiznaiver or Franks or BNA, where the reaction was a lot more like mixed and confused and being like, oh, this could have been better if you did stuff differently. Dynazenon definitely feels like there are pieces about it that are missing that are preventing it from being truly great, but everything that's in it there is still very, very good and like and deals with a lot of like interesting ideas that it's like, oh, that pick up from like the topics that Gridman handled, and both follows up with related themes, but also picks some new themes that it like tackles and picks about, and it does a lot of like it does do a lot in its a short time. And while I do think it's again thing of like, oh, it would have benefited from more time, I do think that kind of like the original Gridman series, that this 12 episode, like it could have had like it was able to handle everything it needed to do in those 12 episodes. It's just like those 12 episodes probably could have been like rejiggled a bit and maybe done other things in different spots, and it's like, yeah, and it would have been like perfectly well good. And funnily enough, and I'd say while overall Gridman is definitely the better one, it's just the more like it's more solid, it's more better structured, has much more interesting ideas. There are little bits and pieces of Dynazenon that I actually prefer from Gridman, so I think that'll be interesting to go into and like talk about like, oh, these little bits and pieces that I think it kind of improved on in some ways.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of tightening that you can see in Dynazenon, but I feel like there are other things where it's like what you can tell is it was a different direction. Dynazenon feels like it does have its own different style, its own take, but and I do like how a good chunk of like the beginning of the show too just kind of ties into where, if you're only familiar just with Gridman, you're probably just familiar with like the symbol, and you're kind of watching, you're wondering, well, there's kaijus, but is the kaijus really just the only similarity? Like, is it like Final Fantasy where the similarity is just the blue text box? Like, is the kaiju the text box? But I do like how then the show kind of puzzle boxes itself and is like, oh, well, look at this, where it's maybe it's more connected than you think, and then it fully like fastens itself together, and in true Trigger fashion. That's what I do like about it, is that like show wise it's a lot more subtle. Like, characters are not hyper posing with like text appearing on the screen. You still get characters screaming, but I think it's super funny that it's taken very realistically. Like, if you are screaming and yelling in a battle, everyone around that character is looking at them like they're weird and crazy. So I do like how that there's space in that in like the Trigger catalog, but then it still does hit the Trigger highs of a giant exploding robot. There is even a giant space robot battle. It's not even the final battle. It's like what, at fight 3 or whatever. It's like one of those like weird physics defying battles where the monster blows up in space with no air. But there's a giant robot there, so you can forgive it and just clap and applaud and cheer as the theme plays. And oh god, the theme. Trigger, you done it every time. There is no failed. There is no wrong. If it's a Trigger opening, it slaps, and it slaps you hard across the face.
Yeah, we can jump right that for Imperfect is like a song where it's like, yeah, it's because that and Union, the Gridman theme song, are both like, they're both very similar songs, and in like both like the type of hard rock.
Oh, they give me Tales of Symphonia intro vibes, where it's like it's the same song, but they're different songs.
Yeah, and they're
But
both very good. I do kind of have to put it a little bit to Union. Like I think I like Union's direction a bit more, but yeah, Imperfect is still very very good.
okay.
It's basically like comparing Serious and Ambiguous from the Kill la Kill openings. Like they're both great. It's just whichever one's like they're both like equally great. It's just whatever your preference is. And I like Union just kind of just smidges up just a tad, but Imperfect is like I still listen to both like endlessly on my phone, so
It just depends what Triple Q remix I'm into at the moment.
the what is it, the High Hopes one. I remember listening to that. Yeah, I was listening to that one. It's like that one's great.
For me, Imperfect, kind of my opinion on it followed the same trajectory that the show as a whole kind of did, in that when I first watched Dynazenon, which, like you said, we had already been recording, so I was like, oh man, I'm gonna watch this. I'm gonna talk to Stefan about it on the internet. It's gonna be a blast. So I watched Dynazenon for the first time and finished it. Loved it. Like, I thought Imperfect was the boppiest banger that banged out everything. Like, it almost touched Soriro Days, and we're gonna get to Soriro Days, but Imperfect was so good. I had it on a loop for a while, and I do like how one stylized difference between Gridman and Dynazenon is, whereas Gridman does use Union frequently, it doesn't use it like every episode. Dynazenon, I feel like, kind of relishes in its theme. It relishes in Imperfect, and it will use it like all the time. Like, can you even call it an SA2 moment if they play Live and Learn at the end of City Escape? Does it still count? But so the first time I watched it, I loved it. It was at the max love, and then while recording and stuff, I kind of went back and rewatched it because I was like, because you had finished watching it, and I remember I asked your opinion, and you were like, it's okay, it's not amazing. It's like, how do you not think it's amazing? So I went back, rewatched. It's like, okay, it's not as great. Like, I started to kind of get more into like the slower tone on Dynazenon. Like, I guess like the battles just kind of really stuck to me. The moments when Imperfect were playing just really, really stuck to me. So those were kind of on replay in my mind, that when I went back on a rewatch and kind of saw that, the show moves a lot slower than I really remember it being, even though it's just only on that 12 episode length. And that was kind of when I was like, maybe Union is the better opening, because Union slaps and bops every single time. And then I managed to. I did like a highlight rewatch like right before we recorded this as well. So I don't know. Imperfect is still like one of the best. It's probably going to be in my top 3 if we ever do like a list episode on them openings. But it is one of those things where it is kind of like the 2 openings for Kill la Kill in terms of like with Union, where it's like it just kind of depends which one I'm in the mood for, or whichever person makes a slapping or mashup remix of them that I decide to put on a loop and listen to for hours on end. It just kind of depends, but they're both really good. But I do just think it's really interesting that Dynazenon focuses on Imperfect being its like one opening and like uses it a lot more frequently than Gridman, versus Gridman diversifies it. The fact that Gridman uses Yume no Hero at least once, kind of shows that at least Gridman was diverse in its song choice versus Dynazenon. It does have another like song that it uses towards the end, but like, it sticks the landing with Imperfect, like start to finish. So I think it's just kind of cool how focused the show is on that opening and how solid and good it is, as well as that ending. It has a cute ending. I know we just kind of gushed a while there, but watching Galma do laundry will always touch my heart and give me nice warm feels.
Yeah, and you mentioned about how like the pacing and how you thought like, Dynazenon like felt slower like in comparison, which is it's kind of like for me, what I felt is that I honestly felt Gridman felt slower, but like in a different way. It's like Gridman felt intentionally slower, and like the way shots linger and the way like it was directed and everything was paced, it definitely felt like Gridman had a much more like slower build, but like did it in a much more like in a very tension way, because of course with like the nature of like what Gridman was about, and like the whole like thing about like how the kaijus come into play, and like how like the learned like everything like connecting to each other, like there is like a much more of like a tension and and like an anxiousness and like a mystery to like what is going on in the world, while Dynazenon has a more slice of life feel to it, of just, oh, here's just the characters just living their lives, just doing whatever. Occasionally a kaiju shows up and they have to deal with it, and then they just kind of go back to just doing whatever. So it's like the pacing in that way kind of feels much more like relax. Like it feels like it has a lot more just kind of like a chill, like for a chill like environment for majority of it. So it's like in a lot of ways I feel like Gridman captures the slowness of it more than Dynazenon. It's just the fact that not as much is happening in Dynazenon, so it feels like it's more slower.
Do you think a piece of that might tie into like the moral of Gridman? Wherein, like, the moral of Gridman was to get to the real world, was to escape a fantasy world and be in the real world, and then the sequel, Dynazenon, is in a real world, and there's no twist that like, oh no, we're in another character's mind. Like it's fully just real people, real life. Yeah, it's as far as anime goes. It's one of those like you think this is a game while playing a game, but like, do you think there's an intention in that, maybe?
Well, because it is still kind of confusing of where, like, this world is, because, like, which we'll get into a bit more once we like, get into, like, the nitty-gritty, but there is definitely some, like, with the way it connects to Gridman, what kind of world this is does kind of offer some questions of being like, okay, so like what exactly is this? But it's like, yeah, first we can just jump into just kind of do what we usually do and just kind of explain the premise. Is that so? Like it focuses like the series starts focusing on this high schooler named Yomogi, who just has a run-in with this kind of like homeless dude that he ends up like giving some like food to, and the guy,
a referential sandwich, mind you. Every
sandwich I almost forgot
is a reference.
Yeah, I almost forgot. Like the first time I saw it, I saw the sandwich, and I paused. And I sent you the picture, and be like, "Oh my god, it's the same sandwich!"
It's the sandwich.
It's the same sandwich that
Gridman
Akane has in the beginning of Gridman. But it's like, yeah, so he gives him the food, and then Galma's, and then the guy whose name is Galma just basically is just he's acting like a crazy homeless man, being like, I'm a kaiju user, I'm gonna help you out, I owe you, and Yomogi's like, yeah, so just leave me alone. And then so it gets into this thing where it's like, oh, he has a run-in with a girl in his class named Yume. And at the same time, a kaiju ends up appearing, and turns out that Galma ends up showing that he's telling the truth as he unleashes a kaiju/robot thing called Dynazenon that needs 4 people to control it. So he ends up basically sucking in Yomogi, Yume, and a NEET that had just happened to be walking by named Koyomi,
a bystander.
Yeah, and then they go they fight the kaiju, and Galma explains. And Galma explains that the kaijus are just kind of running amok, and now formed as Dynazenon, they need to go and stop them. And that's pretty much like the main setup. And then we learn that there's these group of four kaiju users known as the kaiju eugenicists that are the ones that are controlling the kaiju that emerge to basically run amok, because they want like the world to be run by kaiju, and it's their job to stop them.
And they're related to Galma. They have past boyfriend drama, all 5 of them, like hardcore. The breakup was nasty. Actually, sorry, all 6 of them. There's another one, but we'll get to her. She's there too. But
yeah, so the plot is like it may be one of the more simple, like it's one of the most simple like kind of setup and plots, because it pretty much
boy finds robot fights monsters.
Yeah, because other than like other than a couple reveals that happen halfway through the series and then like near the end of the series, like nothing really changes about the plot. It's like it's still just about stopping the kaiju, and like there's nothing really like more like there isn't nothing more like extra depth to the story itself. It's just this is what happens, and instead, Dynazenon is more focused on like it's not like I mean, Gridman obviously was focused a lot on its characters, and like obviously lots of other Trigger series focused a lot on their character dynamics, but Dynazenon more than most. I feel like I think this is what we said. Like this is basically Kiesniver done right.
It's basically like stylized. If you were to say like Gridman feels more in line with like it's weird, but like Inferno Cop and the idea that like the characters stand for things. Like I know it's kind of over analyzing Inferno Cop, but like the characters are more than just Skeleton Cop Man. Like he's meant to be all of this chaos all together. Versus, and then so with Gridman you have high energy, high style, and then Dynazenon I feels is like I said they blended it into Kiesniver, which is the more look at these people. I wonder how they feel about each other.
I just think it's funny that you chose Inferno Cop, the shitpost, rather than say Kill la Kill, like the series that actually does have so much like under the surface about what its characters mean.
That would have been the other one. I was thinking Kill la Kill, but I was like, I don't know, because it's like I didn't feel it was bombastic enough. Because I mean, again with Gridman, it's this tricky thing where like, yeah, they're characters, but they're also literal like allegories of fragments of personality. So where it's like, man, that's where like, fuck it, just Inferno Cop, just the giant baby crab that is invincible to guns. That is the closest you can get.
But it's like, because the way the story because there even is a point like near the end. Like I think the reason why I did the Kiesniver connection hit me like by the end when like everybody actually gets like straight up Kiesna scars like on their thing that like that symbolizes them like bound by their bonds, but only without the toxic abuse connected to it. And instead, it's more so about it's another similar scenario with Kiesniver about people who would never like be together like normally, basically being forced together through an accident
robot.
And like and then showing like, okay, we're together, I guess we're gonna have to do this, and like now, and we see how those relationships like naturally go through this like through this impossible scenario, because like you have your typical generic Trigger male protagonist, though thankfully he's not an amnesiac this time.
He knows his past. We don't know it. You have to watch the stage play to know about his past, but he knows it, so that's, credit points.
We pretty much all we know is that his mom has a new boyfriend and he doesn't like him.
He has a new step Frank in town, and he'd much rather work minimum wage than hang out with Frank, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, then Yume is pretty much a girl with all of the issues, to the point that it's a whole thing of she'll constantly ask people out and then ditch them, and then Yomiuri tries to give her the benefit of the doubt when she asks him out, and then she just ditches him again. And then it's like, and when he even gets called out, and when she gets called out for it, she just says, "Yeah, I have issues."
It's very weird how overtly toxic she is, given Trigger's history, given Kiesniver. Like, we're gonna go back to, like, I know it seems weird that you think this would be the discussion where we keep going back to Gridman, but we're gonna go back to Kiesniver a lot, especially with Yume, because I feel like she gives me Kiesniver vibes the most, in that, like, she feels like that character that's meant to be this, like you said, we're going to force you to be together, but you got to be together with someone who is already just very, very messed up, so you're going to have to, adjust and understand and investigate and help them heal and, go through the works of an actual relationship. And so just kind of with her, though, it was kind of interesting that you kind of pointed out that in terms of like the triggery tropes, that she's kind of in the same category of like the ambiguous antagonist, that like if there had, aside from the eugenicists who are pretty, unambiguously the bad guys, Yume is kind of this like, oh, are you going to be the problem? And she kind of is, but also kind of isn't. Like over the course of the show, in terms of getting the giant robot to come together and blow up the monsters, like it runs rather smoothly over the course of the show. Like there could have been a couple episodes where like, oh no, we can't Dyna-Zenon because we are having relationship problems, but the show never really gets to that point, which I think is interesting again, given that we had Kiesniver where you had a whole episode where everyone was writhing in pain in the rain because of mere jealousy. So I think it's kind of weird that if we're gonna do the emotion trauma robot, that we're not gonna have a moment where I mean they have the Voltron moment where they can't combine, but they immediately recover. It's a quick recovery, which is, I know it's because we have the 12 episode structure, but I just think it could have gone that extra step. Again, getting in the robot, using the robot combining those mean things in like how the characters interact. It's a symbol of where the characters' relationship and like what they've achieved with that. So
there is technically a thing of, because it's like I think it's episode 6, the one where it's like the three of them are each dealing with their own kind of emotional stress, and because of that is like the robot like isn't functioning properly, and like Galma has to try and control it all by himself, which he can't. So it's like and that's what leads to the other character to show up. So it's like, yeah, so we do kind of get like some of that whole thing of like, oh, the character's emotional like duress makes it like harder for them to control the robot.
Yeah. It's just I just feel like they set Yume up to kind of really have like this whole backstory that would have been like on that like whole Kiesniver level. But I mean, and I guess like into the spoiler there, it just kind of, when they set her up as having, oh, she has a dead sister, and then it sets up the whole mystery of, well, was her dead sister's death suicide, accidental, and then like that plays to her character. But I just feel like it never, I don't know, like the problem and the solution there just kind of never gets to a satisfying point, I feel like.
Yeah, because I do think it's really interesting because that first episode, I thought that Yume was going to be the ambiguous rival character, like Noriko, like Nazuna, like Satsuki, like Leo, like just all those like Akane.
She's almost 110% sympathetic. Like, she literally did no wrong and is in a shitty situation that anyone would be upset at. It's like, oh, never mind. Like, that's not even a difficult thing to empathize with.
Yeah, and also because we get that. And also, pretty much after the second episode, she basically stops being difficult. Like it's one of the most surprising things that, like, in the second episode when Galma is like, okay, we all gotta train and like learn how to like control Dyna-Zenon. Yume's the one being like, yeah, sure, I'll do it.
She shows up,
and Yomogi's the one who's like, nah, I've got busy shit to do. Like, she has to be the one to convince him, and it's like, you would think it would be Yomogi trying to convince, like, oh, cool, aloof Yume is like, I don't care, I don't give a shit about these like robots and all this like kaiju shit. So it's like, yeah, it is like a weird like direction that they do that. And then pretty much most of like the B plot of the series is about Yomogi trying to like kind of break down her boundaries to kind of like help her, which like and her breaking down her boundaries by basically finding out more about what happened with her sister, because her whole deal is that she never got closure with her sister. It's like her sister was always very cold to her, like for pretty like basically like reason that she never understood. Then like the day before she died, she was like, hey, come to my recital, and like in a very like happy like tone. So and then she died. So it's like, yeah, she never got to find out what was going on with her sister. And it's like this whole thing of like her search of finding meaning. And it's like the ending that we get is like very kind of it feels cheaply conclusive, but I think depending on
it's a realistic ending, and I mean that in the driest sense, like not even in like a complimentary way, just it's realistic. You're right.
Yeah. But also, like, well, I mean, realistic, but quote unquote realistic, but it's also, she talks with she talks with the past version of her sister in a dream, where her dream sister is like, hey, don't worry about it, I didn't kill myself, it's fine, don't worry about it.
Right, it's very questionable.
Yeah, so it's like from that perspective, I could kind of see it as being like, yeah, it kind of feels cheaply conclusive that it's like, oh yeah, a dream version of her sister said everything's okay, and she's like, okay, everything's fine. But I think if you do kind of look into it, in the fact that we never do actually get like a clear answer of like, oh, the dream girl says that she didn't actually kill herself and it was an accident. But we still don't actually know how, what was she feeling? Like, she does, like, say some, like, the dream girl says some stuff, but it's hard to really say how much of that was 100% accurate to how exactly, her real sister was feeling. So it still kind of has that inconclusiveness of being like, oh, yeah, she'll never actually have, like, a true answer of what was she feeling and what did she want to do and, like, what was going on with her. But it's like, ultimately, she has to be like, oh, she has to let go, and, like, she knows that no matter what she was dealing with, her sister did love her, and like that's what matters. And then she's able to go ahead, and the fact that she has people who want to, in a lot of, yeah, and who want to share like that pain that she's feeling, and that in turn kind of gives her like that gives her that motivation to keep going forward rather than constantly pushing people away for reasons other than she feels like that's the only thing she can do.
Like all things aside, like aside from Galma, like we'll get to him just because he's he's the biggest protagonist, I think, in the show. Like what they do at Yume is it's fine. Like any other show going through this kind of exploration of a character of like, going through that hunt for closure only to find something that at least gives her comfort, but also recognizing that it's not a final true answer and that she has to, find that closure within herself. Like that whole plot is fine and good to have. I just feel like in context of like what we've seen like from the studio, it's like, especially considering that this is the most we see, we don't see anyone really kind of go beyond this, is just kind of underwhelming. I mean, especially given, and it could be because the giant robot moments are so bombastic and huge and big, where it's like, okay, well, we could have the big cry moments get that big and huge too. We've seen the studio get there. If for a moment too, because you had pointed out that like that Yume gives off that ambiguous villain vibe where there's usually a psych out, it almost kind of got me honestly thinking about, man, what if the show was trying to do like this whole psych out where like Yume is projected as very overtly, toxic, like you can tell she's going to be a problem, versus like what if the actual like inter-robot problems were going to be from Yomagi and Koyomi, the introverted toxicity, the whole like they're the problem, but not because they're being mean to everyone, because they're dealing with such bad stuff within themselves that they're not able to fully contribute to piloting the giant robot. I thought it was gonna be like a weird like trigger thing where it was gonna be like, toxicity exists in multiple forms. But the sad thing is that kind of Yomagi and Koyomi don't really get that either. Like Yume is the pinnacle. It's the most and the deepest we get. Unfortunately, the boys on the team just get shallower from there. It's a little sad. Like it's kind of where it's not as bad with BNA, but I definitely wish that Dynazenon maybe had like 3-4 more episodes. Something, anything to kind of just give everything a little more time. Like I know there's additional content, like I guess there's a stage play and I guess there's a sequel thing, but I don't know. I just feel like that the fact that some of these characters that we, especially given that this is meant to be a focus on relationship, like with Gridman, 12 episodes work because it just starts focusing more and more on the central one main character over the course of the show. Dynazenon has this cast of, I mean, it spells out as 6 stars, and then it's like, oh god, we got to keep track of all of them and have them be fulfilling and cool and awesome, and it just kind of, I think it did a good job. I like all the characters. There's not a character in the show I don't like. I think it's more just because I like them. It's sort of, man, I would have liked them to have been a lot deeper and richer and more full of fun moments.
Yeah, like I think like the characters are another thing with because with in Gridman it was a thing that we said, which was like pretty much other than Akane and Anti, there wasn't really any like real like in-depth characters like because you had like your main 3 and Gridman, which are like, oh, they're pretty good to have like serving like the specific tropes, but
they're
it's
from
also
the show,
like,
so you have to have them.
Yeah, but it's a thing of like they work better when they're like representing the roles that they play in Akane's story rather than as individual characters. So they kind of had that, and then you had like the Neon Genesis High School, which was basically
they're literally tools. They were meant to be
they have no
tools,
character. So. And then Alexis is a very kind of like, he's a very mixed ultimate big bad villain of like, oh, he has some cool things about him, but he also kind of like struggles in a lot of way a lot of big bad villains do. So it's like, yeah, the Gridman's cast, like while they work very well in like the story that it's going for, on their own kind of like, they kind of like waver a bit. Like Dyna Zenon, it feels like in a lot of ways they kind of like like you said, there's a lot about them that are incomplete, but it also kind of feels like I feel like Yume in a lot of ways, even though it has incomplete, it does feel like her arc is more focused than why am I blank? Who's the girl in Gridman again? I'm forgetting. Rika, yeah, we're saying stronger than is I think is a bit stronger than Rika's. I think Koyomi is a bit stronger than again the glasses, the smart boy. I'm blanking on his name, and then although. It's weird because I'm glad that again that Trigger wasn't going back to the well of another amnesiac main character boy. But I do think Yomogi kind of suffers a lot from not really having a really distinctive personality. It's just he is just boy. And it's like he has issues. He has issues about him, but it's like they only kind of half focus on it. There's like little nuggets that they kind of like bring up, but it's just most of it is pretty much just being, I want to fuck Yume. That's like pretty much his only like super like personality trait I can even like recall, and the rest of it is him just being like helpful and like resourceful, and that's about it. Like he doesn't really have much going for it. Yeah, versus again like Yuta doesn't really have a lot going for him too, but again, like when the way he serves like Akane's story like works very well for like what his like limited characterization.
He's an ideal nerd boyfriend. Like, what's not to like? Other than he probably is halfway down the alt-right pop pipeline on YouTube, which
oh no,
always stop your nerd boyfriends from falling down that pipeline, ladies. Am I right?
But this series does have it has their Kamiya, it has their Gallo. We've got our savior here. We've got Galma, and Galma is great. Yeah, just right there. Yeah, because Yomogi in a lot of ways is kind of like he's set up as the quote-unquote protagonist since he's like the audience surrogate, but like Galma in a lot of ways has so much like he's the one with the main arc and the main drive for everything. So it's like in a lot of ways, yeah, you can say that Galma is the actual protagonist and be like, yeah, I'd buy that.
No, it's Yomogi's perspective because he's the one that's gonna see all the characters do their changes. But no, this is Galma's story. And he's such a great guy. I do have a question though. Is he like the evolution of the Kamiya? Like, can we expect in a couple years to see a very Galma-esque himbo-y character, or do you think they'll revert back and we'll have to re-click up the Kamiya counter?
I think it depends. I think if it's another Imaishi project, he'll probably stick with that with that.
It's one for each. You're
Kamiya
right.
Haircut. Yeah, but like I think Amemiya, who is again the director of this, like he did for Gridman, and I think maybe other Trigger projects like not done by Imaishi might like follow this route of like we don't have to do the Kamiya himbo like haircut and design. Like they can like mix it up with like different different looking hair and different body shapes. And yeah, but just have kind of like the big dopey guy that like
You'd
that like
be
is
surprised how likable a character is when his defining trait is stating his core set of principles over and over again, whether he can even remember all said principles. But if he's willing to repeat them to you every chance, I mean, eventually you're gonna hate this guy slightly less.
And we never know what that third one is.
I mean, I think we have some ideas. We might have to go over and compare our headcanon fan notes on it. But I mean, like, I want just because we'll get to him to just because he's also the big tie-in to as well into Hyper Agent as well. I know when we were talking about with Gridman, I was going back to it a lot, and I feel like I said, and I stand by that this is equally as attached to it. But Galma is actually a character from the original Hyper Agent show. He is a one-shot episode character. He doesn't look super familiar, but there was a mummy who was buried with a dragon, and so he reappears here. It's the same dragon at the end of the opening. We talked about Imperfect a lot, but so re-listen to it one more time. That dragon at the end. There you go.
Because there's a thing of there's that Chinese dragon that appears at the end, and then in the very final episode, there's like a thing of like, oh, they're looking at like a news thing on the phone, and like it references a mummy coffin, and it's like, and then like after we watch that, and then you told me like, oh yeah, that is specifically referencing an episode of Hyper Agent Gridman that this is, which we actually watched. So I watched that for the first time like immediately right before like when we recorded this.
I think that's awesome. I think that's some Yoko Taro shenanigan stuff of just like, hey, let me do a sequel to one episode of a thing, like not to the core concept of a show. No, I'm just gonna do a sequel to this one episode.
It's Wrath of Conning.
Which you blew my mind with that. I never put it together that like, yeah, it really is just the hyper expansion of one character. And then in this case too, when we get to our titular giant robot, the giant robot is also related to Ultraman as well, or not to Ultraman. Well, yeah, it's all to Ultraman, but to Gridman, to Hyper Agent Gridman, and his arsenal as well.
So to quickly go through the rest of the characters, just so we can get that out of the way. There's Koyomi, who is like, yeah, he's the shut-in NEET who like he's just in his room all the time, just on the computer, just lazing away, unsure of what he wants to do. He's got a little cousin named Chisei who just always follows him around.
I felt these two had like the most trigger potential. I thought these were going to be like our heart and soul characters, because like I really thought like Trigger was setting up the whole NEET character, which to set that up is like not in education, employment, or training. So in Western culture it's usually just when your parents are disappointed in you, but Eastern cultures will tend to have a more of a designation of just someone just not really engaged in adult life.
Basically, Yomogi was one truck away from being isekai, basically.
Very much.
Instead, he got attacked by a robot.
I was gonna say because even before like the whole getting isekai, yeah, back in getting his smartphone to turn him into a level 99 character, like before that there was like the hikikomori, not fat, but like the phenomena there. Because I remember that with. Where was in addition to not engaging with society, there was people like just full on not leaving their room, and so just a complete disassociation to society. Which in this character sense, he at least leaves his room, so we're good on that front. But like not to make it a weird thing, but just in comparison, given Akane, given the fact that Trigger has shown that they are sympathetic to people to characters of people that are anxious about the world. When I saw Koyomi the first time, I really thought, I was like, oh no, we're gonna probably get like a whole Akane thing where like it's all about him discovering that the world ends with him or something like that. But and we kind of get that. We get a character arc from him. But I thought it was going to be something more dramatic. I thought we were going to get, something where, I don't know, like where like the show kind of like yanked towards him or something. But instead we just kind of get like a mellow ride. We get like a slow glow from him. We get a payoff at the end. We get like a glow up moment, and it's good for a laugh. But I don't know. I just, maybe it's probably just a thing where I was really reading into maybe this show too much. Like full disclosure, when I first was watching Dyna Zenon, I was also watching Wonder Egg Priority,
Hmm.
And one direct priority has a lot of really messed up like home situations. It literally even has like the whole my mom is dating a new boyfriend. And so that's kind of maybe also where I was a little like disappointed as well, just in how Yomugi and Koyomi, one, names are too similar. Didn't like that. Two was that just how lackluster in terms of like especially again like this is supposed to be like the sad robot binding sad friends together. The when two of the friends' story isn't really that sad, it doesn't really seem like they're like I don't know. It was just another moment of again where like I like the character. I think this could have been something really fun and like challenging on Trigger, but it just ends up just kind of being a character. He's there. He's nice. He drives the car with guns. It's super cool. And like I even thought that that was gonna be like a whole symbolism thing, like a whole Utna thing. Like he needs to drive himself. Like he needs to like you know engine life. Like I thought it was meant to be like a metaphor, and then it didn't. It's like okay, sorry, my bad.
It was really weird,
But
like what exactly they decided to like focus on with like with it with I would yeah with at least with the art the his kind of emotional like duress arc that like is in like that we see in the series, which is basically this whole thing of him reconnecting with someone that he used to go to school with, who just so happens to also be a Yomogi's coworker, which is something that never really like gets brought up or paid off. It's just it's just a thing that
makes things
happens.
awkward. It's to make things awkward, and it makes, in all honesty, like she gives me creepy vibes. Like she gives like way more creepy than the teacher of Kiesniver, and like we ranked him as like one of the worst. But she's not doing too hot herself.
Yeah, it's such a weird thing because it's like because he does that and it's like they meet up and then they start going out to drink like more frequently, and he's basically like, okay, and especially because she's like basically venting about her husband the whole time, so it's like is she like is she like trying to come on to me in some way? Like what's going on here? And then like when the husband does show up and it's like just chatting or whatever, and he's like it's the thing of yeah, it's the thing of like he's like he has like a level of like it's that very awkward social cues of like I think I'm reading into this, but I don't know if I'm reading too much into this. So it's like it's a very weird situation that it's like why am I like stuck in the middle and having to like figure this out? And it's like yeah, it's the thing of like it's a thing where it's like in a lot of ways it doesn't get again like it doesn't get greatly resolved, but like in a lot of ways I can you can see why it doesn't get like resolved in that way, because like oh it's trying to be like very like oh again like there's no concrete answer of what she was doing, what exactly is going on with them, especially like again like you have like that whole stuff gets resolved and then they flash back to show oh yeah like their whole thing like in the past was like it's another thing of like oh like shit that apparently like again like they don't show a lot, but like with the context clues is supposed to insinuate that like oh she was like a bad girl that like tried to tempt him over to his side and he like ran away, and he felt that it was wrong of him to run away because he felt like he was like being a coward and like not facing like his issues, instead just choosing to run, which is like again like represented by him like again choosing to just hole up in his room all the time and not like do anything. So and then we see like we see the payoff is him basically saving the husband after one of the kaiju attacks, which then leads to them apparently fixing their marriage problems that were happening off screen, which then also gets paid off at the very end of the series where the husband helps get him a job because he's like oh hey I got a job for you want
Because
to do
it's
it.
not nepotism if you saved his life.
Although, I don't think he knows he saved his life because I think he was unconscious. So I think it's just a thing of like, oh, like I know you're looking for a job here, but I like you, kid. Here you go. And it's like, yeah, it is very weird. Like again, like what her whole deal, especially because again, like her connection to Yomogi is also the thing of like it feels like it's just a thing of like, oh hey, yeah, it feels like it's more of a fun connection rather than like that's supposed to mean anything, because it doesn't seem like there's like really any like meaningful like connection between the Yomogi's coworker also be having gone to school and having a relationship with Koyomi.
And like it's nice at least that Trigger at least gave Koyomi the sympathy of like, that his neatness, I don't know what the word there, that it stems from a trauma, that it's not from him just being like bad or lazy, that he had that they acknowledges that this is behavior in response to a trauma as well. And I do like too, like with Chisei as well, just because they kind of, I like them as a duo. I like them too in the whole like tokusatsu sense, that she's part of the team, like she's in like the opening lineup without actually like always 24/7 piloting a robot. So I think that's kind of cool. And I think like also just kind of with her, it's again, it's more compounding on the message too of like that whole, that she's also kind of fitting into the whole, shut in lifestyle, and she's not confronting life as well. I like how what they do on her and with the plot line with her, it's a bit better. I'm sure it's probably just because it's something more comfortable. It's basically the same plot line from Supernatural Battles, but but I do like what they do with her. I think that they're both fun characters. They're both endearing. Like they're allowed to be flawed and a little annoying, while also like you don't end up hating them. You don't end up like thinking like, man, why are these two on the team? Like understand, even though they're the most circumstantial random additions, you're like, all right, no, they've stepped up. You see the work they're putting in, and they're cool characters. It's just, again, I think if it had more time to give them, maybe I don't know, maybe if it had like another episode, just maybe like one of Koyomi, like really doing nothing. Like just give us like a boring like montage to just show that he's just wasting away. Because one thing that shook me was when I was reading the wiki is that he's 33. I thought he was like
Hmm.
mid late 20s. I was thinking like, yeah,
Yeah.
I get it. He's slow in life, but then I saw he was 33. Like, no, this is a grown dude hanging out with just a child all day.
Yeah,
Like, I
he
know it's his
doesn't look. Yeah,
cousin.
he doesn't look 30 at like. Yeah, I think that was the reason why they made him his dad. Why they made her his cousin, because that would be even weirder if there was just like a 14-year-old just hanging with him the whole. And I mean, well, I was about to say he is hanging with two 16-year-olds, but then also Galma is. I mean, yeah, Galma looks more 30 yeah, Komi looks like mid-20s, but yeah,
It's
Galma could pass for a 30-year-old, even though he's of course 5030.
the whole team as a whole is very suspicious. Like, it's very. Thank God it's animation is all I can say. But I was very shook. I didn't get like those kinds of vibes. Like, I don't know. Maybe again, just probably it could have helped maybe to get more scenes of that. I did like when we start to get the characters having to go through like actual life changes, because they even say it, the kaijus change them. And I do like how the show like very explicitly, like, the characters are not being dumb, that like, I've been going through some changes lately. It's like, really? Could it be the fucking robots or the giant monsters you've been fighting in the robot? Could those be the things changing lately? I do like how they're not subtle and they're just saying, I'm changing because we've been fighting giant monsters. So I do like how we get those moments with him. I think it kind of, I don't know, but it also gives like low bar sense, where it's like, well, yeah, it's easy to show the easy growth and change in this character. Like, you set him up as having to do the small easy changes. But I do like how they also do it with Chisei as well. And I do like with her as well. We even get, it's kind of cool just with the characters. I know we've been saying it with a couple of the others and kind of may have come across like as a negative thing on it, but I do like the sort of like ambiguous resolution of it, because there are some of the problems that like the characters are dealing with. I think like it's because they're more realistic, whatever. That because they don't have those like black and white, like set in stone, like right answer, wrong answer. Like, there is no concrete way to deal with your stepdad Frank. Like, there is no way to deal with the anxiety of going back to school and stuff like that. So I do like how the show also doesn't try to be like, and then Chisei felt all better and she became an A+ student. Like, they kind of shows that even like with them trying to, like, it's not a perfect like growth from all the characters with what they do show in the show. So I do like how it's another one of the positive good moments in it, that like, even if it's not like fully solid in like showing the characters and like what they go through, I do think that there are good moments where it shows a very solid like grasp on those characters and like the emotions that they're trying to show, and it's what I really like about the show too.
Yeah, and then because Chise also just kind of like I think she works very well as just as basically a support like through the series of just like both in terms of like just like emotional and just like being like someone for everybody like to bounce off of, and then we see like how like she has her moments of like being like getting the chance to even like pilot the robots for a little bit. She gets her own companion in the form of like her own kaiju, which is like how she's able to like really like actually get into the fight along with everybody else. It's just the only weirdest thing is that like at the very end when like everybody is like moving on and like basically getting ready to like complete their arcs, it's like she's getting ready to like start going back to school, and then the end is just, oh, the school's destroyed, you have to wait for that. So we basically just get no resolution of that. It's just, oh nope, she's not going back to school right now.
That felt more cop-outy. Like when I say that
Yeah.
I liked the end, I liked it more when right before the end, like right when everyone's getting ready to leave, how she's at the gate and she just still can't quite go. I liked that because that felt like, at least she got to the gate. Like, you got to give credit to at least getting there. But no, when they're just full on like, oops, school blew up. I was like, no, no, you can't just blow up the problems away. But I guess, when your best friend is a giant golden dragon, you can. Also, shout outs to the moment where she's running after him after the river gives me hella season 1 endings of Digimon, and you can't tell me otherwise. But I mean, it's a pretty cool team. Like, I like that they're the way that they are just super mix matchy. That there are those different relationships. How you have the two that are basically a couple, the two that are family, and then Galma being our shining hope, our beacon, our bestest of boys, with just to kind of unite them, and like he even tries to coordinate them, and then they basically work through their trauma, question mark, kinda, sorta, I don't know. The giant robots show up and they blow them up, so hey, they're able to do that.
Then I want to bring up again like the other group of our main character. Yeah, because it is also a thing of like our main group of characters is like it's very small. It's like I think it's basically like I think 11 or 12 like characters that matter in this entire series, which is like, I mean, that is like pretty much like close to what Gridman had, but like this one, yeah, it's again like it's a very small like insulated group. So it's like with this we have like our quartet of antagonists in the form of the Kaiju Eugenicists.
Because the Dynazenon team, or I see it called the Galma team, which perfect. That's the right name for that. I feel with Dynazenon style going way more tokusatsu. That's why we have the the team of 5. Very Power Rangery versus Gridman is very much just hyper agent of the 3 kids in Gridman. So I do like how that's kind of for better or worse. That's what kind of gives us that bigger cast. But I do like it, and then it does come with the opposing team.
Yeah, and I in a lot of I honestly do really like the Kaiju Eugenicists, and they might honestly be in like the higher ups of my favorite Trigger like villains, because I think they do because they do a lot of really cool things. Because it's like after Yume is revealed to not actually be the ambiguous antagonist, once the Kaiju Eugenicists show up, you realize, oh, like these guys are ambiguous antagonists, because like they have the whole thing of like, oh, it's the usual formulaic thing of they show up, the Kaiju show, like they basically they represent Akane and Alexis's role combined of like they see a Kaiju going around, they use their powers to take it over, the Kaiju runs amok, Dynazenon beats it, and then they leave, and it's so and it's a thing.
Repeat.
Yeah, and like they kind of treat it like a 9-to-5 job of like, oh, once they find a Kaiju they'll do it, but when they're not, they're pretty much just like they're basically on break, and like they don't really have like you have like because they all represent like their own kind of like own feeling of like you have a Onija who is basically the really angry guy who just wants to murder Galma and all that.
They're
like,
very unambiguous at the beginning. Like they literally all just want to like kill everyone. And then I do like how, like you said with Onija, like he's literally I just want to kill all the human. Like, and it's great that the character just kind of outright says it. But it is kind of like you said, instead of unironic or instead of ambiguous, these guys are super unambiguous.
Well, see, I say ambiguous because it's like you have like Onija, who is just the straight up psychopath of be like he's chaotic evil of like, yeah, I just want to kill and destroy. You have Juga, who's like, I guess you could say he's lawful evil because his whole thing is, oh, I wanted like, he's like, I need to do this because it's my purpose. Like his purpose is to power the kaiju so kaiju can rule the world, and it's like it's basically,
and because he loves Galma, and Galma broke his heart.
Yeah, Juga's basically, it's nothing personal, it's just business. Then you have Mujina, who's basically kind of like, she's basically like true neutral because she doesn't really care one way or the other. It's just the fact that, oh, she's a kaiju user, so I have to do this, but she doesn't actually have any like innate feelings about what she's doing or like, oh, like what her beliefs are. And then you have Suzumu, he's the one who's much more interested. He enrolls in Yomogi and Yume's school and like becomes their classmate, so he can like get closer to them, and like it seems like he's getting in a very kind of like friendly way, so like the point where they're like, huh, maybe we can like reason with him somewhat, and it's like Suzumu has these moments of being like, oh, like maybe he does like kind of like he's willing to listen and willing to like have an ear open.
Suzumu starts his own dating simulation game. He transfers into school and it's like, I'm going to get me a human girl.
Although thankfully no weird love trianglesness. It's pretty much it's just Yomogi and Yume. Like there's no weird stuff with Akane and Yuta and Arika and like all this other shenanigans. It's like, yeah, no, just them two, and it's like kind of in the back. Although we do get an actual confession, like at the very near like I think like the second last episode, he just straight up says, "Yes, I like you. You want to go out with me?" It's like it's not like good. Yeah, I think it's like because I'm trying to think of. I'm pretty sure almost like even at the end of Kiznaiver, they say they're like in a relationship, but we never actually see them confess to each other. So it's like, yeah, even that, it's like, yeah, like I don't. I'm about to say. Well, I was about to say one other ones, but yeah, Frank's obviously they does that. Like it's the best moment in the series. So like, yeah. Like other than that, it's like, yeah, most other trigger ones don't really go for like the actual confessions. Like, oh, that one goes for it. And yeah, no, it's like I like because the reason why I also said that they were the ambiguous antagonists, because the whole time I'm like, okay, so these are the four guys, like they're kind of treated in a very like Team Rocket-esque way of like, oh yeah, they're like, whether they constantly keep like cutting to them, basically like when they're not like activating the kaiju, they're just doing very, very goofy shit of just hanging out, chilling, just being people. So it's like they have a very likability to it. And the whole time I'm like, okay, where's the big bad? Where's the alien that's going to show up? That's going to be their master? And it's like, I'm just waiting for that. And then it's like, by episode 10, they don't show up. And I'm like, oh no, are they just gonna drop it in at the end? And I was so scared because I'm like, there's no way, like, I was so like, just trained by Trigger's villain issues by just being like, yeah, like there has to be a mastermind here. It's like there always is a master, like it's like with Alexis. It's like, oh, Alexis was the mastermind. Like there has to be somebody who's like, they're like that's somebody that the kaiju users are like following. But then it turns out, no, there isn't. It's just them doing what they feel like their only purpose is. And
it's great. Eggman's the bad guy. It was Wily all along. The eugenicists just want to destroy all humans.
And so when it gets to the end and they are the final boss that they gotta fight, it's like, holy shit. It's like, I actually feel things for them, because it's like, yeah, when they're having their whole thing and all of them are fighting each other, and it's like, I actually do feel like emotions, because in a lot of ways, it's like, yeah, they're the villains, but they're also interesting villains, because it's like, yeah, like they just want to destroy and just unleash the kaiju, but it's also, you feel like they're trapped in that purpose of like, oh, we're kaiju users, we have to do this, we have to serve the kaiju, and like, while Gamma was able to break through with that by finding a new purpose, they're like, we don't have any other purpose, we're just gonna keep doing it. And so it becomes maybe it's because I've been watching Demon Slayer a lot, but it kind of feels like, I mean, like, the spoiler alert, like the ending when they all die, it gives me very like the moments of like when the demons die in Demon Slayer, of like, oh yeah, they have to die because it's either them or us, but also it like, oh, there's a sense of sympathy, because it's like, oh, like they felt trapped by, like they felt trapped feeling like they had to do this. So it's like, oh, like there's like a sense of like empathy like to them in their dying moments, like when they're basically exploding in that bright light, and they're all like accepting death. They're like, huh, yeah, so this is the end, huh? And just kind of like going out smiling, and it's like, oh, it felt very like nice and effective. And I'm like, oh yeah, like this is why like some of their this is why I say this is they would count as the ambiguous antagonists, and why I think Trigger should make their ambiguous antagonists more straight up villains, because their characters become so much more interesting like that way, because it's like, yeah, their moral compass becomes much more flexible, and showing that, oh hey, the moral compass doesn't automatically just swing back to good. It's sometimes it does, the moral compass does swing back to evil. So it's like, yeah, it leaves it so much more juicy and interesting to digest.
Absolutely. It's like the whole thing with Dynazenon. You're watching it and you're like, huh, the main team isn't really getting all of the as much character development as you like. And then you look over at the evil Quartet and you're like, whoa, there it is. Like, I think it's just super nice that, like you say, you get, and that's a really great way, the Team Rocket moments. They are just all those weird moments of them hanging out, because you can tell they're super like out of place too. Like, Galma is out of place, but he's a weirdo and we love him and he can act however he wants. But like, the world of Dynazenon's pretty realistic. Everyone looks like they fit in, like, 2020 ish, versus the Eugenesis. Like, they're basically walking around in like the fabric version of like knights armors and stuff. Like, they look all kinds of otherworldly and they act weird too. And so I do like them again in this, just that whole beginning arc where you're kind of just slowly learning what the heck's going on, and you see them go through the Tokusatsu Monster of the Day cycle. You see them use their instant domination ability, where they take control of the kaiju and make them grow big, which is, I do, like you said, how it serves both the Akane and the Alexis role, where the kaiju, they're kind of destructive in their they're kind of destructive in their initial form, but once they're like dominated by the Eugenesis, that's when they grow big, and that's when they start like rampaging and stuff. And then, like you said, like, it's kind of interesting just throughout all that you're hearing the Eugenesis talk about how like it's for the kaiju, the world for the kaiju. Like, it's kind of really just kind of ambiguous, but also you kind of get the point that just how important the kaiju are to the Eugenesis and like what they mean. And then we also kind of like learn about the kaiju themselves, just sort of in the context of not just the show, but like in terms of the SSSS series. Because again, when you first watch it, that's kind of really the only thing that ties the two shows together, is that the monsters are both called kaiju. But I do like with Dynazen on how they try to explain them. They try to give them, not personality, but they try to explain that they feed on human emotion. So that kind of explains how, with Chise, how Goldburn shows up and is her bestest friend, is because he was probably feeding on the emotions of her needing and wanting a friend and wanting to join in and be a part of the team so badly. So I do like how you kind of have that twist in there. And then, but it's kind of not as poignant with the daily kaiju battles. It's not like a 90s tokusatsu show where, oh man, we're attacking the circus and making everyone very sad. That's making my sad monster super big and making everyone sad. Instead, it's very much just kind of, I think like the kaijus in Dynazenon are really interesting because they have weird like physics powers. Like, they turn things 2D, they fluctuate gravity, they increase gravity. Like, they have weirdo powers, and I think they're pretty badass. And so I kind of was telling with Stefan that like, the first chunk of the show is just kind of the let's learn how to pilot the robot part of the show. And like, it's in every show that has the giant robot, but Dynazenon has it too. And I like that part of the show, but it is very much just, them learning to pilot the robot, learning how the robot works, us learning how the Eugenesis works. And you have sprinkled moments of Yume's backstory, because again, that's kind of the only like character backstory that you get any like B plot focus on in the beginning half. So you get a lot of that in the beginning, but it follows a good formula. It gets you in the cycle good and early, in terms of how the show is going to structure the kaiju battles, which are all still good. They're all still magnificent in comparison to like Gridman. They all still look like a dude or two in a costume, and it looks like another dude in a robot costume beating the crap out of him, and it's anime gold.
I do think I think because of like what you mentioned about like them all having like these weird these weird special powers, I do think that does help like make them a lot more memorable, like a bit to me, than the ones in Gridman, because like they pretty much just were like those designs, and it's like because there's so many of them, I've kind of like a bunch of them have kind of like slipped my mind of being like, oh yeah, there was that thing and that thing, but like yeah, maybe it's also because it's like obviously Dinosaur is more recent in my mind, but also yeah, like the fact that he said the one that can control gravity, the one with the weird spots, like the
paint one. Well, I feel like with Gridman, the kaiju are very tied into being like Gridman references. Like they tried to get one that like I know like the big turtle one is just kind of an easy one to do because it's a big honking mass. Like you don't even have to try, because they were going for picking certain kaiju that like you could tell it was tied down by the limitations of a dude in a costume, versus like the Dinozenon kaiju. I think they were trying to expand it a bit more, as opposed to trying to be like, hey, remember this one from Gridman, remember this one from Grid. I don't think any of them are super too referential. They kind of reference back to like tropes and stuff, but they kind of go off the beaten path with some. Even naming wise, I know a lot of the names, they're not like one-to-one, but a lot of them will have to do with psychological things, either with like effects, phenomenons, or disorders. I think one of them is called neophobia, which is not an actual thing, but like you can put together what the word means, a fear of new things, which haha, what would you say Akine's biggest weakness would be? But
her smell,
right? Stairs.
She probably never takes a bath, so yeah.
That's they always say that's one of the first steps to overcoming the pit, my dude. But no, I do like how with kaiju, and it does tie into the plot too. Then just kind of what their nature is. I feel now it's more questionable in terms of like the SSSS universe now, just like you said, like just because we don't now really know what the nature of these worlds really is. But I do think it's interesting that like they're trying to expand on like what the big bads are, that they're not just a reference to a guy in a costume, that they're trying to make them they're going full Heartless. They're giving them a backstory and giving them lore, and I think it's working in their favor. I think it helps a lot with what I enjoy about Dinozenon, is that it does make, because again, like the giving the kaijus more personality only benefits and makes the kaiju Genesis seem even way cooler, which they already are. So again, I think it's just super cool that in the giant sad robot anime we get not one, we get two good teams of sad people, and then we get to and instead of the meme where it's like they're kissing and they're both boys, it's like, and they're both punching and they're both sad.
And yeah, and since speaking of like connecting to all of the different universes, lead to the best character, who is the one to come back. Auntie is here,
and he's accompanied by
Good
Best
night.
Girl the second.
Froppy is back.
Yeah, I remember when you had messaged me. Because you were
because I didn't know
first couple episodes. You were like,
yeah.
I like it, but you explicitly were like, I just don't see how it ties together. I'm like, well, just wait, you're good. And then like literally, you have the time elapse, and then the next message is yo Auntie, and I'm like, there you are, he made it.
Because I didn't know that Auntie is the one that comes back for you. So I was like, holy shit, yes! Especially because Auntie was, I think, the best character in Gridman. So the fact that we get to see more of him was like, yes, Although it is kind of, mostly because his arc was done, so again, it's just seeing it. He isn't like as like Galma, like in Dynazenon, Galma is the better character than him, just because he's very much like as the stoic guy of like, oh, I just want to do this thing, like you guys are weird, I don't want to be around you, but like, well, fine. Yeah.
He's the one who's gone on the journey. He's our Auron, even though like he's not the ripe old age of 25. Anti is our Auron, who guides the team with having been on his own trigger journey.
He has aged, so yeah, it is a thing of like, yeah, like we know he's aged because like he's clearly like he's clearly older now. It's hard to tell how much older, especially because he's a kaiju, so it's like age doesn't really matter. But
it could also be that the second, because we've seen that the second can change like her shape, like she makes herself huge, so she could have changed hers and Anti's appearances. It could be a thing kaiju can do. Which again, that's another thing I like. I love that they're a team of either like former kaiju or related kaiju, but they call themselves at the end irregularities, which is still fun too. But I do still like how we have this team of what should be the bad guys going around now being like, hey, we're here to help you out. And they do it in the most badasses of way. Like Grid Knight has the Gridman grow scene. Well, all the parts of the Dynazenon robot also do it as well. Like those are not gone. Like this is still a wholly Gridman referencing show, if nothing else.
Yeah, so you have the whole thing, especially because it gets to all of like the really like, I mean the all of the fights are like really cool like beforehand, but once Grid Knight comes in the fray and you get the Grid Knight and Dynazenon combinations, you have Grid Knight using Dynazenon as a fucking cannon to fire at everyone. How they all form together to become Kaiser Grid Knight. It's like seeing everybody fighting together is just, it just makes it so cool. And it's just like, yeah, like that, like what it pretty much, yeah. It's like I said, that once he comes into once he like shows up is when I think the series really like speeds up, like both in terms of the action and also the story kind of like gets more focused, because like now once they have a greater idea of like, oh, like what exactly is going on with the kaiju and everything, then it leads to them like like their emotional arcs like start wrapping up a bit. It's like, yeah, and I think he shows up. I forget if it's episode 6 or 7, but it is almost the exact halfway point when he shows up, so it does feel like kind of planned.
Yeah, it's just about there. Yeah, because you have the first couple episodes where you're like, you know, they work on combining. They do some of the mini Dynazenon combinations, where you have Soldier and Wing combined, and then they try to combine with the Striker car and Soldier. Everything just combines with Soldier, which I think is funny. Like, Yomigi does not want to be at practice because he wants to work and not be with stepdad Frank, but all of the combinations involve him. So I think that's funny. And then I do think it's cool how like they put their brains together and like, why don't we just let the 12-year-old use the Soldier robot? And then they let her and it doesn't work out. But yeah, then so I do like how they kind of get those taken care of. It's really similar to like the first half of Gridman, where they throw all the Evangelion combinations as well, so you get all of those taken care of. So in the context of like an old show, you get all those toys checked and sold. But then yeah, once a Grid Knight shows up, it's like a whole another heckin' level. But I do like how it just ties completely into, you know, Dynazenon being that reference to Gridman's Dynadragon. How like they worked together, and then even in our reference show, they start by working together, and then they combined up together. And then they have a giant robot cape, which, what? I lose it every time when the robot grows a like star cape. Like, it's so cool.
Although, again, and now you have, like, Knight, Anti, and the Second's whole introduction does then like, they're arrived, because, like, we know, like, they arrive from the digital world, and then at the very end, they go back to the digital world, but, so then, this brings up the question of, okay, so where exactly in the universe is this world, because of course we have Akane's world, which is when Gridman takes place, and then we have the real world when Akane wakes up, which is like, oh, the live action real world. So it's like, is this world that Dynazenon takes place, is this the real world that Akane wakes up in? Is this the same world? Is this Akane's world from Gridman? Is this a completely other separate world? It's like that is like doesn't really get like explained, which I feel like that is kind of like, in some ways I guess it doesn't really need to be explained, because like if you're watching it on its own, like Dynazenon as like its separate series, it's like, yeah, like, that doesn't really matter as an answer. But I feel like when you're trying to connect this to the events of Gridman, it does kind of be like, okay, like wait, which world is this in? Because I do think there is like, especially considering how the world reacts to kaijus, it's like,
because we don't get the show resets.
Yeah, because
like, Gridman had the whole like, it's following the TV show rules, but because the malevolent god wills it so, in this it's just the world.
like if I had to say one, I think, big issue I have with the series is that I think the stakes are basically kind of all over the place, and it's hard to really buy like the whole, it may seem like a whole thing of like, oh, like you're caring about the people like under like it's like the people like the city doesn't matter. It's like it's supposed to be all about like the monster, like the two monsters beating each other. Like you're not supposed to care about everything else, but it's like, no, like Gridman made a whole point about like you said, like the monsters have their fights and then it gets reset, and like that's
part of the problem. The reset is part of the attack. Like that's part of what's wrong, is that there's the reset. And then Dynazenon even has full on scenes where they visit the destruction, which is, I think, like, I thought they were gonna, I'm with you on this, where it's like I thought they were gonna like stick their whole finger in and go like, all right, let's explore the topic, but it's like, oh no, never mind, we take it back.
And also, like, even when everything gets reset, there's still stakes. If somebody dies in that attack, they don't come back. So it's like there's a whole thing of like, oh, we can't just go nuts and just let people die, because then, oh, like it's just gonna come back next. Like, no, people who die don't come back. So it's like there is still stakes. Like the only things that aren't stakes are like the destruction, which is like, yeah, that's fine, and it works in the narrative. But here it's such a thing of like, yeah, so a kaiju will attack, the damage will still be there. Like the next episode, there'll be like a news thing of being like, oh, hey, a kaiju attack, that was weird, huh? Anyway, and it's like, yeah, like the kaiju are literally just treated as an anyway, they're treated as like natural disasters that like, oops, this happened, oh well, we gotta go fix it. And it's like so if kaiju aren't a big deal in this world, I think we kind of should know about that, because again, like that doesn't seem like that would be the real, like the kaiju aren't, they don't feel irregular. Like they are, this isn't like, say, the real world that, oh my god, suddenly kaiju and suddenly this giant robot thing are fighting it. It's like it's considered a big deal. It's like, no, a kaiju attack happens and then everybody moves on, and there's, yeah, again, and there is no like, oh, there's no reason behind it. There's no like actual like law like thing of like, yeah, like these, like with Akane fixing everything, because yeah, the damage is still there, people are still talking about the kaijus, but only barely. It's like a mention that a kaiju attack happened, but nobody really cares that kaijus are in this universe. So it's like, is this Akane's world where kaiju attacks are like, now kaiju attacks are more frequent, people are like, oh yeah, we're dealing with kaiju, or is this another separate world where kaiju attacks happen more frequently?
I had an idea that was kind of like a sort of on like the Recreator vibe, where it's a real fictional world. I know that makes no sense, but in the sense that like all of these animated worlds are fiction, and so they're all connected, and all even more so since they're connected to the digital world. Which, I mean, you know, like a fictional world and a digital world would be like the most connected, and so I think that might be the vibe that they're kind of going for. That like it's not the live action world. It's not which is also a fiction world, but I think it's just all the animated worlds are connected. and connected to the digital world.
Like, this is another world made by another like not Akane, but like somebody like Akane created this world, but didn't like lock themselves in. Like,
yeah, they're
like,
not retreated in it. It's just a world. Yeah,
it's just somebody. Somebody envisioned like this mind, and the mind was created the world in the digital verse, and it's like, oh, but they didn't resort back into the world. It's just something that exists. It's like I feel like that's probably like the most like the correct answer that we would probably get.
Do you want to get all icebergy and let's say that this is Galma's world?
Well, I mean, maybe. I feel like that could work. Yeah, I was about to say, because Galma dies, but again, it's like, oh, I mean, Akane leaves her world, so it's like, yeah, it could just be, oh, Galma left the world and goes to the thing. Especially because, again, like, the connection to because it's like, okay, so Hyper Agent Gridman happens in this world, but then wouldn't that, and then like but then wouldn't like Gridman itself, like, unless it's just a thing of like, oh, so like it can be kind of becomes a funny thing of like, oh, Gridman is now dealing with a similar in SSSS Gridman is dealing with a similar thing that happened to him in Hyper Agent Gridman, since if that also happened in this timeline. And so it basically be like, oh, this is kind of deja vu. I'm pretty sure I fought you. So she's seeing Alexis, so like, I'm pretty sure I fought you already. It's like in the context of Gridman, like it was like, oh, like it's like a remake of Hyper Agent Gridman. But now it's like, since now Hyper Agent Gridman is actually canon to Dynazenon, that means it's canon to Gridman. So it's like, okay, how does that fit into all this? And it's like, yeah, it's another weird mix up and like
You just let it. Like, it's meant to connect. I don't think it's meant to connect cleanly. It's just meant to connect, just very wholly, just like in the sense that they're pieced together. Like the parts might not match, but especially with the Hyper Agent to Dynazenon. Like, if you want to get nitpicky between like the SSSS Gridman to SSSS Dynazenon, by all means, like, that's within studio. But I feel like most of the Hyper Agent stuff is meant to be just sort of like in a spiritual sense, as in like this item, these ideas, not necessarily in this order. But yeah, no, it is kind of funny just when you watch the Hyper Agent episode with the mummy and the dragon, and the mummy getting hijacked via the internet for his MRI and CT scan to like reanimate the corpse, that like this all happens and he just goes back to sleep, and then he wakes up as a lovable anime protagonist and remembers none of it. Okay.
And also, the kaiju that Suzumu turns into at the end is, because I realized this after, like, right after we watched the episode, I was like looking at something. It's the same kaiju as the one that's in that Hyper Agent Gridman episode. It's a Gagula. It's like the weird cyborg T-Rex thing.
Oh, I didn't even realize that is Gagula. Holy cow! Which
yeah, so there's the other connection to that.
A kaiju, which I don't think we. That's also kind of tricky. I'm not 100% sure on like if he is the kaiju is inside him.
I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be the kaiju is in, because it's a whole thing of like, oh, he kept the last stone, he kept the last kaiju stone inside of him, and it's like the whole thing of like, oh, the stone, like the kaiju are born from like the emotions, and it's like, oh, the stones like then are born into kaiju, like the Goldburn is born from Chisei's emotions, so Gagula is born from his emotions, like pretty much. Like I feel like that was the whole thing.
They're
of, like,
born from it, but they also say they feed on them too, so that's where it's like it gets really tricky, that they really tried to explain a bunch of stuff with the kaiju, but I feel like some of it's not like well explained, especially the whole stuff on just like their real connection to like human emotion, and like especially tying that into then the SSSS Gridman kaijus, and like kind of what they symbolized in that, and then how they connect and are they one and the same with these kaiju? Because these kaiju are also a little different. One thing I noticed with the Dynazenon kaiju too, and you kind of see it in the opening, is that a lot of them have towers, or they have horns that look like towers. Sometimes they look like electrical towers, or like network towers, but they're things that send out signals. So I'm not sure if it's meant to like just tie into the whole emotion theme of them, that like, you know, they broadcast and receive things like emotions, or if it's to tie into something else. But it's something I did want to know. I did know on like the kaiju design too, just sort of with the added detail in them, is that sort of that they added that to, not to just about all of them. And then, like I said, when you see the kaiju eugenesis in the opening, um, behind them, they're like neon colors. It's the towers for the kaijus.
And going back to the stakes thing that I mentioned, as I think another
Yeah.
issue is, again, like with the whole, like the way, the reason why, like with the whole thing of like, oh, people not really treating the kaiju as anything important, also kind of extends to the fact that human like casualties only matter if the story like feels it. Because there are times when like they'll just go nuts, just attacking whatever, and like the people like never get mentioned. And then there'll be some times when it's like, oh now like suddenly it's like, oh, there's people like there that are an issue. Like honestly, I'm pretty sure there's only 3 times that I can like remember when like people being in the middle of the battlefield actually mattered. It was like the one time like very early in one of the first episodes where like there's the bus that almost gets attacked that Yomugi like jumps in to save. There's again like Inamoto's husband that Koyomi saves, and then when the giant like dot like kaiju like goes nuts and is about to like attack a building with people in it, and that's when Yomugi,
That little guy is the best.
that's when Yomugi tries to do his instant domination, and it's like, yeah, like
Yeah.
like those are like the 3 times I can recall off the top of my head when like people like mattered, and the rest of the time it's like, oh, people don't matter. It's literally just the 2 things fighting, and then after like, oh, nobody got hurt. Actually, nobody was around at all. Convenient. And it's like, yeah,
right?
and it just feels like, yeah, it just feels kind of cheap of like, oh, like we know like you know, like you've brought it up several times that, yeah, sometimes people get hurt on here. So the fact that, yeah, you just kind of keep forgetting about it just kind of feels like, okay, yeah, so it doesn't matter. But it's like, yeah, if the stakes don't matter, then like what really, like, again, other than the emotional stuff, but it's like you can't just go on that emotional stuff. You kind of need something like that to kind of like ground the world. So it's like, I feel like the emotional stuff can only take you so far, and without that stuff to ground the world, it just kind of, again, makes everything feel kind of haphazard and like, again, like incomplete a bit.
No, you're right. It doesn't even need to be just that, like, oh no, these characters are not real, therefore no stakes. Because like SSSS Gridman, like, they're all not only fictional, they're literally imaginary characters, but the stakes were that their damage was damage to Akane. Like, there was that stake. So it doesn't even need to be that, like, oh, just these the fact, the ambiguity of these characters being real or not is what negates the stakes. It's really, you can still have them be questionably real. It's just a matter of, well, then what is, then, yeah, what's the loss? What's the, I mean, yeah, other than like the main characters being trapped in their regret and in their pain, which, yeah, that should be stakes enough, but we're gonna need a little bit more to help us root for the giant T-Rex robot with the bitchin' theme playing.
It's mostly just to give everything context of like, oh, like the fact that like the kaiju and Dynazenon are fighting in like a living world, and it's not just like, oh, like whenever they it's kind of like in the Hyper Agent, yeah, whenever like the 2 are fighting in the digital world, so it's like, oh, like they can fight in just this open space without having to worry about anything, but you're fighting in like a world, so it's like you want to, it feels like every time they show up, the world just kind of like depopulates. It's just like, just check, like, to press the X button on humans, and now they're gone, so they can fight with ease with no problem. And then if they feel like the story needs people to get like to be stuck in the middle, they'll do it, but they only do it like a couple times. So again, it's just the whole thing of like it rounds out like the world of being like, oh yeah, like there is the kaiju's being here actually means something, rather than just, oh yeah, the kaiju's being here like literally nobody actually cares that there's kaiju's constantly roaming about every other day. And it's like, and if they don't matter, like at least like explain that. Like, it's like if you establish that, oh, like kaiju's like wreaking havoc is something like decently common, it'd be like, yeah, like then it would be fine. But the fact that it's like, oh, like like, no, you don't know what the connection to kaijus in this world is, because all of the evidence makes it seem that the kaijus are no big deal. So it's
I
like,
feel like
yeah.
that also helps make the eugenicists more endearing too, just because they're so obsessed with the kaiju. Where you're like, thank you, finally, some people talking sense, and it's the people with the giant white jackets and chains. It's like, but yeah. So then, yeah, it's fun for like a couple trips with the second and Auntie. You get the combinations there. Um, you get a couple more full Hyper Agent references with the second her fixer beam, her like staff twirl. That's fully from Hyper Agent as well.
They're both dressed like office workers now.
It's so great. No, I like they're Men in Black. I love it. They're full like agents. I think it's kind of neat. And then the show gets kind of structurally, at least not like context, but the show then structurally gets very formulaic. We get episode 10, we get like the kaiju that finally matters. Like I think I said it to you, where it's like the plot kind of really only starts at episode 10. Like the beginning half is just how do we pilot the robot, and then there's oh hi Auntie, and then we get the kaiju that matters, and then basically it's a 3 episode like ending, just about. Because throughout the whole beginning half and even like in the little couple episodes of the Auntie arc, I think it's interesting that the eugenicists do note that like the amount of kaiju is limited. So kaiju, not only are they all powerful and mysterious and emotion driven and feeding, they're also an endangered species. Apparently,
there's also a whole thing like, I mean, like, I completely forgot. I mean, maybe it was something I wasn't paying attention to, but I could have sworn like the very first episode, the beginning of it, is like people walking around it's like people like they're dropping like the little kaiju seeds all over the place, and it's like I thought like the assumption was supposed to be, oh, those are the kaiju eugenicists dropping the seeds all over the place, and then the kaiju end up being born. So it's like, oh, like they had the seeds and they planted it all and just waited for them to emerge. So
it turns out it's not their plan. They're just randomly revived without any reason on their own either. Like, and it's super weird. Like, it's almost like you kind of should have just went with the cliche. You kind of at least made the fact that they gave Shizunu the whole twist of like him having the kaiju inside him. They could have still had it been like, all right, cool, have the kaiju then be some weird twisted mastermind, and that way you could have even done like a split personality where Shizunu didn't even know, because like the kaiju was the masterest of minds or something. I don't know. It would have at least made the plot feel more cohesive instead of. I think it also kind of ties into the whole stake thing. It also makes the whole fight just seem kind of like a fight that just happened to have broken out. That because there were kaiju around and some eugenicists were revived in the vicinity, well, yeah, we were gonna have a scuffle. It kind of feels that. It feels very set up-ish.
See, I don't mind doing that, like them having that much more personal kind of like almost like lower scale story. Like there isn't like a grand mastermind behind everything. There isn't like they're technically fighting to technically save the world, but it's not like the villain, like it's not like the eugenicists are doing something with like a grand plan of total domination, like say like Alexis does in Gridman. Instead it's just, oh, we're serving our purpose, which is to control and give the kaiju a sense to like we're giving the kaiju a sense of freedom, and it's like, so that's why I don't mind that they keep it like simple like that, because it's like, yeah, like I think having a much more personal like threat like that makes it so much more interesting, of being like, yeah, like they become more like characters than just straight up villains. And I think that does, like, the way it comes together in the end feels a lot more like effective and interesting. Yeah, and because then like, yeah, I loved like, yeah, the effect of that kaiju where it's essentially like wiping people out of existence, and like there's that, and it basically does the like the computer edit of just and with no sound effect of just gone, just gone, and it's just then
frame, then no frame. Yeah, no, I love it, and then it leaves the whole pulse / atomic bomb burn scars.
Yeah, and then like it just keeps popping out everything, and you'll just see like a whole like circle or like section of like a thing just gone, and so yeah, just completely silent. Like
the patchwork squares, which gave me I don't know. Did you see the whole Adult Swim the Learning with Pibby thing?
oh yeah,
The whole like darkness taking over the It seemed it gave me kind of like that, like that
the
whole
corruption, yeah.
like a whole darkness just like taking over. Like it gave me the most you know how like Gridman, like we said, how it was trying to like give you like the rules of the show, but in like a monster attack type way. It gave me very much like this is like the channel changing or like just the show episode ending, and so like the city was going away in black squares. It gave me kind of that, even though I don't think that's what it was shooting for, but I thought it was just a neat effect for like how are we gonna make the whole city disappear bit by bit.
And honestly, I think this is far. Honestly, maybe it's because I've kind of gotten slightly over the like I've gotten slightly over like corruption in like I used to think it's really cool, but maybe it's because the internet has done it so much that I'm like, okay, I'm kind of over just like corruption and just everything just imploding on itself. But like just a simple just gone, like just no sound, just somebody just vanishing out of existence and just nothing, and just everything just going like with no implication, like there's nothing to chase, it's just nothing, and I feel like it's just so much more effective.
And the scene where it happens too is so good because they're like running up the stairs and like they disappear at certain times, like some of them vanish like mid-sentence. It's so good. The editing's great in that whole scene.
Yeah, like I think that is like so, and yeah, and then you have like a Yomagi is like one of the few like to escape, so he like he jumps into the kaiju and basically starts like infiltrating everybody's memories,
which is odd because it's I don't know, it's almost like the show did it on purpose. The fact that like when with SSSS Gridman, when we had the sleeping kaiju and everyone was trapped in basically Akane's ideal situation of them with her, all of the characters were trapped in a thing. All of them had to have a moment where they realized that like, no, we want the truth. We don't want ideal Akane. We want real Akane. We want real Akane to wake up. And all three characters have an arc of that. It seemed really weird with Dynazen on, and it's probably just because it's a bigger cast, and I get that. But it's super weird that like Yomugi basically insta escapes like his problem, which the show didn't even want to confront at the very end when it was like, okay, are we gonna like be like, oh, here's my problem, we're gonna have to see what my problem is, was like, oh nope, easy problem, Dino Soldier's here, solved, get out of here, you got friends to go rescue. It just kind of, I don't know, I felt like if there was any moment that they were gonna like give the characters like the depth they deserve in terms of like having this show be a show about recovering from regrets and stuff, it was like, oh no regrets for young Yomagi, just keep working yourself to death so that you don't have to talk to your stepdad Frank. Like, okay, fine.
Yeah, it really shall. I think you mentioned like it should have been it really should have been like a 2-episode thing of Yomugi. Like Yomugi's in it for a bit. Yomugi's the one who escapes, and then he goes through, and we get to actually see a bit more of everybody's like pack, because again, it fits in with that incomplete thing of like, oh, we get to see little bits and pieces of everybody's past, but it's like, but it doesn't feel like there's enough. Like we get to see like Yume gets to have like the stuff with her sister, and like we get like a bit more of that. We get to see stuff. We get to see a little bit more of Koyomi with Inamoto. We get to see a tiny glimpse of Night reliving a bit of
that was the best part, which is so sad because it was the shortest, but that was the best.
No, I think that was good that we didn't see more, because all we need to see is just him in front of the silhouette of Akane. We cut away, and then we cut back, and he's like dealt with, like, we don't need to see anymore, because again, like that is like all connected with, like, yeah, we know, like, we've seen Gridman, like, we know Auntie's whole like story, so we don't need to see more. Like, we don't need to see like what he did in between Gridman, and like that doesn't matter. It's like just that whole remembering of that emotion. But it's like with all of the new characters, like, and again, like with Galma, we get to see a little bit of like Galma when he was friends with the Kaiju Genesis. We see the moment when he betrayed them, but We don't really get a lot of like I think that like Galma would have benefited a lot from actually seeing a bit more, not a lot, but a bit more of his like path, like seeing what the relationship between him and his princess is. Like I think that would have been a little bit more important.
And I feel kind of bad for saying it, but I almost would have taken a Dr. Frank's episode. I would have taken just a plot dump. Here was Galma's past. Like, give me something. Because like what we got is fine. Like I appreciate the hints of a past being dramatic and powerful. Like I understand that effect. But I don't know, I just feel like since this was basically like giving us the whole backstory of like 6 of these characters, it would have been like, really? You didn't want to spend a little more time? Did we have to see Yume playing with the Ankh symbols again? Like I get it. Like we do it. The repetition is worth it. And like we need to see her play with the things. But it was like there was a lot of it, and then we got none of Galma's pass. I'm just saying, if we can divert some resources, could be better.
So yeah, there is a lot more of that they could have really delved. I do think that is one of like my even still despite it that is one of my favorite like episodes of the series, just because like again like it takes the whole idea of like the sleeping episode from Gridman and does like a different like kind of twist on it, and it does like it has some cool things about like it does have like some good like like the stuff with Yume and her sister talking like on the like at the top of the building, like that is like still like really good emotional stuff. And like yeah, like the end, like the ending of like the night, the after they get night, and like just like just the silent, just like they're just his like his blank facial expressions, like oh that's all you need to know, and it works really well. And then like yeah, the big final battle that they have with Dynazenon versus the giant kaiju, like that even before like yeah, the final fight in the final episode, like that was a really cool like just great battle too.
The fact that it moves at lightning speed, so the Kaiser King Knight just uses the circular blade and expands it.
Yeah.
It's like, doesn't matter how fast you go, I'm just gonna cover the entire area. It's fun. But no, I would have like I said previously, I would have preferred a little bit more of Yomogi's scenes, a little bit more of Koyomi. Give me, because that was another one where like his Dynazenon piece just showed up and he was like, well, I'm getting out of here. It's like, but what did you learn? Did you hello?
Especially if we learned more about the, because all we know is that they both found a bag of money. She asked to run away with him, and he ran away, and that was
which is interesting.
Like if we learned what their actual relationship was before that moment, that probably would have like recontextualized, like it would recontextualize everything that we knew about like them like when they were talking like in the present.
True. But one thing I did think was interesting was that so Koyomi and Galma, like, well, they're all trapped in the past, but like the two that when they need to be saved, the thing I think is kind of interesting is that Galma's past that he's trapped in a past, and he made all the same decisions. Like he's still at the point that like where he was, he still betrayed the eugenicist. He still tried to be with the princess. But still ended up dead. So he followed the same path and then got rescued. Koyomi is in an alternate path. Like he chose not to run away, but he's like at the beach with her trying to save the money. So like they're both in the past, but Galma is in a past where he made all the exact same decisions, and Koyomi is in a past that like he's trying to make different decisions. So I do like that kind of those different regrets that kind of tie the two characters there as they start getting their scars. That's also important. It's important because it's in the theme song, guys. It's also in the title. But it's a good episode, and stylized too. Just the all the action scenes where Yomogi is like punching through the glass, and Dino Wing forms up to remind Yume to escape. Like it's all good. It's a great episode. It's just another one where I think just more. If you gave me more, I feel it could have been even more better. But no, it does end with them killing the last kaiju, which I think is super cool. I think that it's kind of fun that we get a faux epilogue. Like we get to see all the characters start to move on, only for them to not need to move on because there's one more kaiju and it's inside Shizunu and it's been there the whole time.
Oops.
feeding off of our lovebirds.
Yeah, because you have the whole thing of episode 11 is basically like the whole thing of like, oh, like we defeated all the kaiju. Guess you don't have to be Dinozan anymore. So they're all like, preparing to move on, and it's like they pretty much all kind of like reach the end of their arcs in episode 11, and it's like, oh, it gets to the point, and then you get the final like big like thing at the end with Suzumu that then leads into episode 12, which is pretty much just like the big final battle followed by their like the actual epilogue. So it is like so it is like kind of like I think like the way episode 11 and 12 are paced out, I think like that were, especially because when you with the eugenicists you kind of see like, oh, like they're both trying to be like, they're like, okay, there's no more kaiju, what do we do now? It's like you have the girl, the girl which has like her weird like relationship with Koyomi, which is, I guess, is the whole thing of like, oh, like Koyomi is someone who also kind of like was big, like as a NEET was basically lifeless, had no direction of what he wanted to do, basically like her. However, with his relationship with everybody, he starts gaining a purpose. He starts figuring out what he wants to do, and then by the end, he's decided that, oh, like now I want to actually make something with my life. While she, even though she's been with those four people all this time, she's still never like actually like gotten any. She's never gotten any like drive to do anything, so she ends up basically like letting out all of her anger like at Koyomi because she sees him as like the person as basically better than her because he actually found like a drive. And so like when they're like all doing the fight, and like he's the one that she is he's the one that she's basically yelling at, like yelling all her frustrations. Like Yomugi and Yume have Suzumu, Thing has Galma has Onija, and then Juma is just kind of like the middle ground.
I think Studio Trigger's one hell of a studio. Like, they'll explicitly have the Burnish say that the Burnish do not kill people. And then at the same time, they'll also make a show where you'll just sit there wondering, wait, why is Mujina mad? I don't what like, it's just super weird.
Well, that was the reason I thought that that was what I assumed she was mad, is because she's mad that Koyomi found like he found a drive and they found a purpose, while she is still basically stuck in I don't care about anything. It's just everything. I just gonna do whatever I'm told. And so like she's basically just like letting out all of her vented frustrations out on him because she sees him as somebody who actually like did something. And it's like, Onuja is pissed with Galma because he's like, he see like they're both basically the total, betrayed, but also like the total opposites. Suzumu is basically like, oh, like he tried to fit in with like, with them and be a part of them, but he's like, no, I'm a kaiju. He's like, not only am I a kaiju user, I'm a kaiju. I can never, even though like, the two of them, they tried to like open their arms to him and be like, hey, you can come with us. Like you don't have to do this, but he's like, no, I have to, because this is what I feel, and this is why. Although, and even then, like when he's doing it, like he does the whole anime thing where his head's down and he has a shadow over his eye, which is like, of course, like it obviously like that always represents the whole thing of like, oh, like that represents the conflicted feelings of, oh, he's not actually in it, and he's like he's reflecting on something.
But then it crosses over into the kaiju head, and it's amazing. Like, it's some good trigger art.
Yeah, so it's in a lot of ways kind of like they're not only killing them and the kaiju, but also kind of putting him out of his misery of like, he wants to die because he doesn't know what, like he wants to die because he feels that he can't like live. So they're basically giving him the most bombastic death that he could gasp, and it's like, yeah. That is a very, very good, like, I wasn't really paying attention. For some reason, I wasn't really paying attention to it, but, like, the second time when you showed me the clip of, like, of the fight again, and, like, the Sawano drop when it goes into imperfect, and it's, like, it fits so perfect. It doesn't fit imperfectly, it fits perfectly, and it's, like, it just goes right into it, and it's such a cool, like, just great fight, with everybody screaming to each other, everybody, like, voicing their hearts out, screaming, people are closed, and all that great stuff.
Well, hold on, because before the whole fight even starts, you have like the whole reveal that Galma is dying. Our bestest of boy is not like, I mean, he was already dying before, but now he's dying again for realsy. And then that's when Shizunu turns into the kaiju. And that's when he eats the other eugenicist, thus evolving into his second form. And so that's when they bring all of Dynazenon back together, and they try to pilot it together with Sick Gamma. So yeah, no, and then then it's yelling, it's punching. I forget what the first song that plays starts playing. There's a whole, if those who know, but the fight turns into a Gurren Lagann reference for about a good hot 3 seconds, and it's amazing.
You did show me that. I know you showed me like that clip where it's like there's a shot that like it's a shot that like was in Gurren Lagann, Dynazenon, Gridman, Ninja Slayer, and I think it's in Promare too. Like it's like a trigger like battle shot that they always reuse.
It's very Akira motorcycle slidey, if you catch our drift. But yeah, it is the fight as well too, despite being super dramatic, is also it's also petty. I love it too, like you said, just the fact that Koyomi and Mujin are kind of fighting like a couple. Like everyone just has these very like these personal relationships in it. Like they're punching it out in giant robots and monsters, but yeah, I do like it. I think it adds to the low keyness of the fight that we did already. There, episode 4 has like the space fight, and it's just one little explosion. I do like how this final fight is just the stakes are the emotions between them. Like even aside from like questionable things about the world stakes, the fact that they're punching each other because they're hurting is it's kind of point enough in that final fight. It's really good. It's really dramatic.
Yeah, it is weird that because again, like after all the fighting is done, all the damage is still like there afterwards. So it's like like the fight happened, but it's just weird that like the fight happened, but like the world pretty much treats it like the fight either didn't happen or didn't matter. So it's like I think like, the emotions are all still there in that fight, but then the aftermath just kind of like, did that happen? Whatever. And it's just, it mucks up a bit more when I feel like a bit more of like, even if it was all just background stuff, like if there was more like background storytelling of like people reacting to like the kaiju attacks and like seeing like more news articles of just being like, you see this shit or being like, oh yeah, it's just another Tuesday. I think that would have just been like, it would help the world building a lot more.
Literally just have Yomigi's mom say, you can't go to work, there are kaiju attacks. That would have been like, oh man, like our character is now in conflict with the kaiju attack in more ways than like something.
Yeah.
Anything. Literally anything. But then we get to the moment. Then we have the moment. Yomigi puts his good noodle brain together and he detaches the Dynacannon, which Dynacannon, great. Awesome reference again, Hyper Agent. I think you were like, you had brought up this like, why does Dynazenon turn into a gun? And it's like, because the dragon's always been a cannon.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty wild in both languages because I had to watch it in sub and dub, but I do like how what was probably like what everyone kind of brushes off as a fun, jokey trigger scene halfway through the show when everyone tries to do an instant domination. When Yomigi full-blown, like, 11 out of 10 belts it out and tries to control Shizumu. It's so good. Dude, that instant domination is worth the entire ride of the whole show. Like, watch this show for that. For nothing fucking... Watch it to get to Shizumu's instant domination at the end, and it will all be worth it.
Yeah, and I'll say the sub for that is better than the dub because Dallas Reed, who plays Yomogi in English, it's like he like pretty much all like he in like most of his dub performances are like he plays very like kind of like, oh yeah, like just a very casual, just kind of like happy-go-lucky guy. And it's so like he fits like whenever Yomigi's just kind of casually just chatting, it's like, yeah, like that voice fits like it fits like a glove, but it's like he doesn't really do a lot of like screaming roles, so it's like that like very hyper emotions. It's like unless he's going for comedy, but like with that like but like yeah, Junya Inoki, who plays in Sub, it's like yeah, he has much more experience. I mean like he's like he has much more experience with like that like loud bombast. And it's like yeah, especially because in both comedy and also in like in like action stuff. So he gets that voice, like he's able to like turn his voice like to have that instant domination do like work in such like an epic cool like oh shit, like it gives you like chills in the way that he like, which, and I mean like he's fucking Yuji in Jujutsu Kaisen, so like of course like he can fit like that style of voice like perfectly, like he does like that is pretty much what like Yuji does all the time. So it's like yeah, that voice like just yeah matches it real so well.
Like it's not an intergalactic like drill. Like it's not an interplanetary fire extinguishing dragon. Like it's not a all powerful bow of pure joy and happiness. Like but that instant domination with imperfect playing is some intense hype shit, and I love it. It's some of my favorite. I do like then after that normally you would expect in like this type of moment that like they would the robots would all ascend to like their final form and it'd be like oh they're gonna all combine together for the final hit. But I love how while Imperfect's playing and they're going for the final hit, that Dynazenon switches to the Dynarex form. They don't go to King Kaiser, they go to Dynarex form. So I just love that that's because for one, it means that you get to see the kaiju's kiss at the end. Because Dynarex like face smacks him. Watch it again in the final bat. The kaiju's just face smack. Um, but that was kind of one thing before, like as we get into the end too, that I want to make sure, because we did talk a lot about characters too, but I firmly want to like make sure that we point out just Dynazenon, the robot itself, is such a good character. Um, and I mean it's always been just kind of an anime thing that the robots have some semblance of personality, but I fully believe that like that there is a consciousness and there is a will to like the Dynazenon, like the robot, the dragon, the T-Rex there. So I do like how just for the final battle it finishes the fight off in dragon form there. But I think it's a fantastic robot design wise. I love the four bits. I love the submarine, the plane, the car, and the soldier that combined in, and then it turns into a T-Rex. Like it's such a cool robot. Like and then the missiles and the tires as opposed to like drills. That's another thing too. I love that it's not just oh hey triggers seventh robot with giant drills. Like Dynazenon is such an awesome original robot. It ranks as one of my all-time favorites. And turning into the giant T-Rex is only a small part of that.
Though I do think it is kind of disappointing that like Dynazenon pretty much doesn't have a character. It's like it literally is just like is just a robot like that they use. Like there is no like the character is the characters inside of it. It's like pretty much up until like the literal end when they bring Dynazenon back to the digital world and then Dynazenon like moves on its own. It's like then it becomes a character, but before then it is literally just. Although I keep saying robot, but like in the universe they keep calling it a kaiju because they think that it's a kaiju. I'm like, it looks nothing like.
Eugenesis call it a.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's super cool that the Eugenesis call it a fake kaiju. Because, like, it means that like, it's from their era. It means it's from their time. So, like, that's kind of also ties into, like, some of my theories, too. That, like, the Dynazenon is tied to Galma's princess. It's kind of why I wanted us to watch the Hyper Agent episode. Like, it doesn't really give any new information, but it at least just kind of shows that, like, Galma's relationship to the princess and the dragon, like, that those are all intimately tied together. Versus like in the show that they're connected, but you don't really see that they're like that they're all together in it versus like time wise. So to me, like I feel like it helps just kind of show like Dynazenon like as truly like this gift from the princess like to Galma, like because the reason he's dying is because he doesn't have a connection to a kaiju. So you can kind of see that like Dinah Zenon was his lifeline. She tried to give him a kaiju, but the best she could do is give him a robo kaiju, the coolest of kaijus.
It does kind of make Knight seem kind of dumb at first, because he immediately starts attacking them because he's like, oh, I thought you were a kaiju. I'm like, do you are like, I mean, like, I know you're a kaiju, but you've seen non-kaiju, like you know Gridman. It's like, does that look like a kaiju to you?
Oh no, it's the shadow effect.
What is this fake kaiju that looks like my twin?
But no, it definitely would have been cool for a bit more out of it though. But yeah, like you say, the most you get is just at the end where it moves on its own. But you do find out that it's like an Ultraman, that it has its own space inside their body. So it again, the Ultraman and the Gridman references never ever end. It's just a crazy ride.
The ending has because you have like the aftermath thing of like, oh, like yeah, it's like a couple months after his death, which is when like they basically gave Galma a mourning period before Auntie and the second left. It's like 6 months later, okay, now we'll leave with Goldburn.
Well, their robot was sick and dying, and then you even see them descend in bubbles. I was trying to think like, okay, what game / anime / movie is this? Because like, come on, we've seen that in like everything where they return from the battle in a bubble. But I do like too, just with the 6 of them there, it does tie into then what I do like how we keep the SSSS in the titles, but they stand for different things now, as opposed to Gridman being a signal to save a soul. The SSSS in Dinah Zenon is scarred souls shine like stars. So I do like how just throughout the show, how they get those scars from the past kaiju, and then after the battle, you have the stars in the sky while they go back home. It's like, oh man, Trigger, you know how to pick them titles nice and good. It gave me a good feel, but yeah, then they do then you get the actual epilogue.
There's also the question of like what the third thing is.
So, all right, it's connections, right?
I feel like because it says it like right when you as they're saying it for that final time, they are like zooming in on like the scars that they have, the Kizna scars that they have. So it's like bonds, connections, like it has to be.
It's Persona all over again.
Like, Persona.
It's literally bonds are strength of heart, blah blah blah. We just want to fuse a giant penis piloting a chariot. All right, just let me do that. I do like it. It does get kind of weird there towards the end, though, when we get to the music. When we get to the school festival, and we kind of have what I guess is meant to be, it's meant to be the resolution to Yomugi and Yume's like arc there of Yume, admitting that she doesn't want to do a thing, but reaching out and accepting the help to do the thing. Well, at the same time, Yomugi has a conversation with Suzumu in the digital world, or like in time space, or he has like a weird like out of body conversation with him, and it's like the usual anime conversation of like, aren't relationships risky? And it's like, well, yeah, but the risk is worth the risk because you get irreplaceable bonds and friends, and the same lesson. It's always a good one. Always remind yourself of it. But it is, it's not in the usual Trigger like, I'm going to shout it while text flashes on the screen. Instead, it's just, can you help me up so I can go to class? It's like, yeah, I'll help you, friend. It's like, all right, that works.
No, girlfriend.
Ooh. And their girlfriends.
Apparently there was a thing like afterwards where they were like, oh yeah, like that they confirmed that they do get married in the future. So it is a weird thing that they went out of their way to mention that, like be like, oh yeah, they get married in the future.
I would have been that asshole. It's like being the when are you gonna release Mother 3 guy, but it's like, but are the Kiesniver kids all married? Are they all poly? Like, what's happening? We need to know.
And interesting because they never did that for Gridman. Like we don't know what happens to Yuta and Rika. But it's like they just come out and say, oh yeah, they're Yuta and Yomogi and Yume get married.
They're not real, Stefan. None of them were real.
I mean, it's always just go where whenever you have like those little things that get announced like after the fact, but it's like it doesn't really affect the story that they like that they like knowing that they get married at the end. It's like it only affects it if like them being married actually matters, which I mean that does lead into speculation, because we do know what Trigger's next project is, and it's Gridman X Dynazenon, and it's going to be a movie too. But it's like all that we know currently is that it's Akira Amamiya is directing again. It has all the same crew as Gridman and Dynazenon, but in terms of what it is actually going to be, like we don't know. Like what I kind of want, like what I like may I think it could work like with not doing this, but what I want is that it to be like an actual like crossover. Like I want it to be the cast of Gridman and the cast of Dynazenon meeting up like in some way. Like I don't know how you would do that, but I feel like that feels like if you're going to do a crossover between the two, that feels like what you would want to do, considering Gridman and Dynazenon's main like attraction is the emotional story of these characters. Because if you just do the Gridman and Dynazenon robots now with a whole new group of characters, like it could work, but I feel like there'll be a lot missing from that, especially because, again, if you're doing a movie, wouldn't it feel more effective to, like, not effective, but also easier to just be like, here are these characters that are already all completely, like, developed, now have them interact with, like, other characters. Like, we don't have to develop anymore, we can just have them, like, flow into like each other, instead grow on, instead of like have them grow, rather than having to create a new character and write a whole arc for them in a movie time.
Yeah, and I feel like, because I agree with you on it being a crossover, that's probably what I'd like to see as well, especially since we have the setup with Anti and the second and Dynazenon. Like we see this crew getting set up of these pseudo kaiju, fake kaiju, used to kaiju, these like not quite kaiju team, and I'm getting these vibes that they're gonna be like this interdimensional team. So that's where I kind of see how Gridman Dynazenon could cross over. Like, Anti and the second are the needle and thread that's gonna like sew a bunch of show squares together. Is what I see kind of happening. Is they're gonna go show hopping or something, or I don't know. I feel like just that ending there of them bringing the Dinorex to the digital world, I feel that gave me sequel Beatty vibes, even though that's probably reading too far into it. But
it's not. I mean, literally, the episode ends with a coming soon Gridman X Dynazenon, so it's like it is a literal sequel.
Oh, true.
So
it does. Yeah,
it's not even like
right.
it wasn't even like maybe we'll get a sequel. Like they literally knew like when they were working on it that was the next thing they were gonna do. So it's like
God damn it! It's just like Kingdom Hearts. They ended it with a cliffhanger and said, "Now buy the sequel, bitch," and I did.
Yeah, it's like and it's also because, and I think it would be because there is like a lot you could do with like having those three Gridman characters interacting with this Dynazenon crew, because it's like they all have, especially because I mean Yuta in Gridman wasn't Yuta, so they're like he's effectively a blank slate now that you could do whatever you want with him. So it's like by bringing it back, like you could basically have the you essentially like bringing those back, like bringing the Gridman characters back would essentially be again a blank slate of like restarting their relationships in some way, and being like you're basically introducing a whole new character and kind of like reintroducing like how his relationship with the other two is. So there is a lot of like actual potential to do like a real follow-up sequel with them. And then throw in have Yomogi, Yume, Koyomi, and Chisei kind of being like a kind of like an alternate that they can like bounce off of and kind of compare themselves to.
And then they show up at Luna Nova.
I mean, and then there's also the question of would they somehow try to get Akane and Galma back, even though like one's in the real world and one's dead. So it's like, would they try to do that in some way, or would it just be?
I would keep Galma dead. That one's kind of, that one seems obvious. The Akane one, that one you might play some. You could. I feel like they might even be sneaky, be like, "Oh, this is my new avatar," and they might even use the word avatar, and it will make my skin crawl. But
Yeah, especially because I feel like Akane is so connected to like Gridman that it feels like if you did like an actual literal sequel to Gridman without her, it would feel kind of weird. And by bringing her back would kind of doing it in the wrong way would just cheapen her arc. To like, what reason would she have to return back to her world? Because unless there is a good unless there's like a fantasy like magical realism where it's like she's basically entering her mind like a VR. And instead of it being like the metaphor for hiding within herself, it's like it's really hard to think of how they could fit Akane like into it in like a way that like makes sense while also not cheapening their story.
I mean, like it wouldn't be the first time they brought a former antagonist back reformed in Gridman. I mean, and he wasn't even the first. So like this is fully within the series. I think it fits into Gridman. I think it's kind of become like the theming of Gridman, just kind of with now the two SSSS shows. Like kind of, I love that the tying threads between them as a series, other than like actual continuity. But I do like just the fact that they are shows about overcoming and about recovery and about healing and about saving, and that it's not so much about like power and strength and for these shows, but about understanding and reaching out. So I do like that it's become these tokusatsu shows about being nice and about helping others. And it's like, oh, it's just super sweet. Now watch the giant robot turn into a fire breathing dragon while it tells that message. It's just it's good anime.
And yeah, and it just it comes together in like a very in a very neat package, and it's like a thing of like, oh, it's definitely, I feel like in comparison to BNA where you're just craving for more and you kind of need more, like it felt like that there was so much more that you could have done that you don't think that it was like the full package. Even though there were incomplete parts about Dynazenon, it overall still feels like a complete. You watch it all and be like, okay, I'm satisfied. I would have liked more, but this is still good.
Exactly. It doesn't feel like the first half of a season. Like BNA feels that incomplete. It feels very much like, okay, where's the like, do I have to pay for the DLC for the rest of this? Versus this feels, full sandwich. Like we got beginning, middle, and end. Would have liked a little more, little less here and there, but I think it's a thoroughly fun ride. I remember like when it first ended and like people were kind of posting their opinion. There was a lot of people that were like, "This might be the best show ever written," and I was almost on that level of hype. But no, definitely with having watched it a couple times, having sat, thought, rewatched Gridman, gone back. I don't know. I feel I prefer Gridman a bit more. I still prefer Imperfect as the theme song more. To Dynazenon's credit, but I like the two together as well. So like as a nice, good, fun double feature now, like soon to be triple feature, because there's no way I'm not gonna be able to. I'm gonna be at a point where I watch just Gridman. It's gonna be like, nope, time to watch Dynazenon and then the movie right after. Like I will not be able to control myself. But I'm just really looking forward to what does come out of the series of it, just because I think that the first two, what we have here with these two shows are two really top quality shows that aren't even like exactly the same. So that's another good thing I really like, is that what we really discussed here was that even though a lot of stuff is on that same Gridman caliber, that it's not just, oh hey, they made Gridman #2 and just followed the same beats and did it all over again. There's a unique, different take on here that explores similar things.
Yeah, and there is Yeah, and there is like enough in it to like we talked about during this, like to analyze and to like to look over, and like it isn't just like simply just doing the same thing again for Gridman. Like it has something to say, and it like does it in a different way, but also like still have carrying that feel of the Gridman like series. So like it stands on its own and works as a great companion piece to Gridman. And it is interesting because I remember seeing a lot of people like reactions saying that they thought Dynazenon it was overall better than Gridman, and I do think there's like like we talked about, there are pieces in it that I do think actually I think work better in Dynazenon, but overall as a product I think Gridman just kind of holds up a bit more. It has a much more interesting concept it's going for. It's a bit more structurally sound. I like how I think it's a bit more well directed, and it's just like just overall as a piece I think Gridman just stacks up there really well as just like what it's trying to say, while Dynazenon is just a very good, very solid piece of animation and art. And it is interesting now looking over that, because we now pretty much at the end of the main Trigger. I was gonna say filmography, but it's like no, it's I don't know what you would call like just like out.
Would it be that? Because the only other word I'd know would be a discography.
Yeah, I was about to say I think filmography counts for television, so it's like just the Trigger output of like being like and I think because since we at like we'll probably go into a bit more once because we still have a couple more episodes to do before we like put a pause. But I think since this is the last final current series, I think we do a little like quick thing of just being like thoughts on Trigger as a whole now that we've gone through, especially that I've gone through all of their like series like in chronological order.
Now that we've gotten here, now that everything doesn't just give you Darling in the Franxx vibes.
So if I had to say, I think probably I've been thinking about this for a while, but if I had to define Trigger, it's Platinum Games. Studio Trigger, how I feel about Studio Trigger is pretty much how I feel about Platinum Games. I think they have such a great and distinct aesthetic that I think it carries a lot of some of the issues that a lot of their projects carry, because like Platinum Games has a lot of they have a lot of flawed pieces about their projects, but I think what they do well, they do so well that they kind of like say like a game like Mad World has a lot of flaws to it, just like gameplay wise and structurally, but what like aesthetically, its humor, its design, the parts of its gameplay just are so enjoyable and fun and just so appealing on its own that it's just I love it more than like maybe quote unquote objectively it probably is. And it's like a lot of Platinum games do that, of just a lot of style over substance. But
I was gonna say they're clear demonstrations that if you have enough style, it can overcome surprising things,
but also not in a bad, because a lot of people will use style over substance in a bad way of like, oh, like there is no, because like I mean Trigger, like all of their projects, no matter the quality, have substance in them, and it's like there is stuff that they all are trying to say, and there's stuff that you can read into, and it's just they just have like the style as the flair that is carrying a lot of that. And it's like and then they have their math, they have like just like how Platinum has stuff like Metal Gear Rising or Nier Automata, which are just straight up like just the masterpieces, perfect, like just great pieces. And then Trigger has Kill la Kill and Promare, and then has like truly great stuff like Gridman, like Space Patrol Lulico, and then has the really good like this, like Little Witch, and then even the ones that are just kind of like like Franxx and Kiesniver and BNA, they have things about them that are still like that you want, that you would go back and check out, because it's like, oh, like I like this part about it, I like this aspect, I like this aspect. And it's like there is,
like, if nothing else, the fact that we spent hours talking about every single one of these shows each should be a credit to that. There's more to them than just style. Like our goal with like over analyzing all of these animes was to demonstrate that there was something beneath that surface. I mean, at least.
Yeah, like again, like other than Kill la Kill has gotten better every single time I've watched it, and it's like it is kind of astounding to me just how much better on more and more rewatch that get that like now, like I think I said like, oh, maybe this is in my maybe this is my like top 10 favorite anime that I've seen. I've seen much more anime by now, and Kill la Kill's maybe in top 5. So it's like, yeah, like that is just it's a thing. It is such a like maybe it's kind of a thing that almost kind of hinders Trigger just because it is the peak, and like they hit that peak so hot, like so early, that it just kind of overshadows everything in some way. But everything that does come out is still very good in their own. Like, so again, something like Little Witch Academia I really enjoy, and it's like it's not something that I would go like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. But it's like if I see something about it, I like everything about it is just so like pure and charming, and it's just like I really enjoy it. And it's just something that it's like it's hard to like you can't really like put like a piece of like, oh, like where exactly this like fits in your like grand tapestry, and it's just like this just something like that's just really good. And like same with Gridman, same with most of Darling in the Franxx, same with Belulico, and it's like they've all got like a lot. It's a thing where the good far outweighs anything that would be okay and below. And so it's like maybe if something as a piece, like as a whole, you wouldn't be like, oh, this isn't like one, especially because like I mean, like we saw we gave like even the ones we really like, we gave like a decent bit of like criticism to at certain points that like really bugged me. But it's like they still are something where it's like I'm glad I digested it, and I want to keep digesting it more, and I want to see more of what Trigger is going to do. Like I want to see how they're going to branch out. Like anytime they do something, I'm immediately going to be like, yes, I need this. Like even if it again turns and it's, yeah, because like even with Dyna Zenon, we were very much in like a positive middle too, but it's like it still did it in such an appealing way that it's like, yeah, that doesn't matter to me. It's like it still shows that Trigger has such a like a distinct feel, which again, like Platinum Games doesn't always do hits, but even when those hits kind of flounder, it's like you still want to see how they're like what they're gonna do. Like you still want to see how they handled it and what they're gonna do next. And it's like, yeah, like that like style. It's not. I want to see. It's not style over substance. It's style a little bit above substance. So it's like not removing
slightly out,
not removing the substance, but having the style be so profound, having the style improve the substance, like having that style be something that like it's the substance is wearing the style as a coat, and sometimes that coat is a bit too big, but sometimes that coat has a very shiny metaphor on it that lets you appreciate the substance just that much more. And I feel like that is my rambling, trying to say off the top of my head analysis of Studio Trigger as a studio.
Bravo. No, and I fully agree as well too. It's kind of ironic that when you think of Trigger's style is, I mean, when having not seen, if you start by not seeing any of Trigger's shows and you're like, okay, describe Trigger's style. I mean, if you've seen one or two shows, then you probably, point out the obvious ones. Like they're probably like, oh, they're weird, they're fast, or they're if you've had the fortune of starting with Kill la Kill, I mean, it's like, oh, that the people that made the Naked Girl Blade show? It's like, yes, that is very much the one who made that. But ironically, like having gone back and now watched all of the Trigger shows here, is that there isn't a style. Like there's so many different shows that this studio has put out that fit so many different styles, but I guess then, like, if you wanted to find a word to describe all of them, then would be originality or original on them, and not just in like concept, but in ideas. In that you have one adaptation among a bunch of shows that are all in their own league of storytelling. Like we said, of varying degrees of success, but are still all trying to reach vastly different, like, written conclusions. And I mean, yeah, Trigger falls into their own tropes, at least character-wise. I mean, get here at the end, what we're seeing with all the characters, how we're able to compare a lot of characters with a through line of she's like this character with a little bit of this character with just a touch of this character's design. Like we see that, but in terms of like what the shows want to explore, not just style wise, but also in those themes, but also in those messagings, you see a lot of originality. You see them tackle and discuss different things and express them differently in different colors with different characters. Yeah, some of those characters might all be a overtly confident female girl with delusions of grandeur, but she's also got a good heart, and we love her, and we want to see her go into space and have the theme music play behind her while she does her super like love blast attack. Absolutely, it's what we're here for. Um, and I'm glad that Trigger is, that studio that delivers that and delivers that, like we said, with that style coat that sometimes fits, sometimes doesn't. Because every time we are just so happy to see her in her coat. It's a good analogy, bro. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna run with it.
So yeah, now that we've gone through all of the main Studio Trigger series, logically would be to go backwards, because like we mentioned in like the second episode, Gurren Lagann and Panty and Stocking have since now reverted to Studio Trigger ownership. So those are both Studio Trigger series. So I think we're gonna go through. I'm gonna go watch Gurren Lagann for the first time and Panty and Stocking for the second time, and we'll talk about those. But first, there's something else I think I forgot about. See, Dynazenon came out in 2021, and Trigger had another project that came out in 2021. They had two projects, actually.
Were any of them a Shantae game?
I would say it's a project that took place on another streaming service in a galaxy far, far away.
Oh, no.
So I think before we go backwards, there's one other thing that we gotta jump a bit forward onto, to Studio Trigger's technically currently most recent project, Star Wars Visions.
Worried about this, I am.